Oh, wow. We're back. Welcome, everyone, to Law and Order, the show where an attorney and some random guy talk about court cases, legal issues of the day involving our politics and culture. Wow, what a day. Some days it's like you just are streaming it the right day, and that's it. With the big cases that we saw coming out today, ones that we're predicting tomorrow, and a bunch of other stuff going on. So, Ryan, it is fantastic to be here. How have you been for the past couple weeks?
Rob, I am delighted to be here again. Good to see you. I mean, for those of you who don't watch my stream and watch on the North side, when all this Antifa stuff came out, I said this is a Christmas present for the North family.
Yes.
My first thought was my buddy Rob is going to be so happy. He's going to have this big smile on his face. We're going to wrap it in a bow and send it to him. But Rob was on vacation, so we even considered doing an extra stream for you degenerates. So because just so you could see how happy Rob was going to be. But so we have a monster of a show today, Rob. Just huge news, huge coverage, Antifa, SCOTUS, the Charlie Kirk trial, everything you could want for on the legal side, you have it tonight.
Yeah, it's truly a ton going on. Now, I want to correct the record a little. While it is true I was on vacation, including to Reptile Land, which is fantastic. I recommend it.
Did you see Blasterbot there?
I did not. Well, you see, I don't know. I did see a guy there that looked like he could be Blasterbot, but he wasn't calling himself that. But it was a lot of fun. Yeah. I was also, coaching youngsters at Turning Point USA to be the dominant conservative forces in the future. We had a lot of utterances that were going on. It was really, yes, it was a tremendous opportunity.
Well, if they ever want somebody to talk law, I'm around. But if they really want a devastating debate strategy, I could teach them the shmoo.
The shma, yeah.
The shma, sorry.
The most effective, shma. Utterances of shma. Yes, it was a great time. But it was funny because, just to briefly touch on this, like when you're teaching debate, I mentioned this last night. Like I would go for 40 hours at a minimum for an entrance course. And so for me, the fundamentals are more important than the specifics. But we didn't get into legal topics, which I think would be a very interesting. There is a nuance to debating like legal topics and like how the court functions, different courts function, that's different than others topics that you might debate. So we didn't get into it. It would have been interesting to have you there to sort of talk about that specialization, I think.
Well, this is you got my number, Rob. I'm around. That sounds like an incredible opportunity. So, but look, you're literally a debate coach. So this is the right guy to bring in for debate coaching.
It was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it. So I think we should start with the super best good news. Now I covered this a little on my show right before I left, but I really was itching to talk to you. And that is the indictment of these Antifa cells. Now this incident occurred in, the case was, convictions were in March, but we just saw the sentencing here in June with these Antifa people. So you want to talk a little about just like what they were convicted of and like why this really does send a signal, what's going on here?
Well, so this is the Prairie Land attack. So there were riots in Texas and there was organized demonstrations. And when we get into the indictment, the other Antifa news, we're going to talk about this more. But we've learned that, contrary to what people say, like, oh, Antifa is just an idea, this and that, there is a definite organizational structure to these protests. It's not everybody who's there, but there are core groups. There are different groups in different territories that are loosely affiliated, but that do organize and that do bring disruption and violence to these events. And in the Texas case, a ICE agent was shot in the neck. He was shot. He didn't die, but he was shot in the neck. And so this was the first one that, to my knowledge, that went to trial. And then now we have sentences. So now we finally have proof in the pudding. We can say, like, if you are targeting ICE agents with orchestrated violence and militant actions, this is what will happen to you. This is the outcome. And the ringleader, in this particular incident, got 100 years, 100-year sentence. And we know we can break that down and get into why. But this is the deterrent effect. This is the big news that it is not a hypothetical. Antifa has real violent operations. They have been caught, they have been tried, they have been convicted, they've been sent to jail for 100 years. Don't be that guy.
Yeah, I mean, my only lamentation was, the short sentence of 100 years. I would have went something for like 50,000. But no, all joking aside with that, like, yeah, I mean, I think it really signifies two things. One is it's the first time that we've seen like a left-wing group as an organization that's doing these things like attacking ICE really face a harsh consequence. And I think that does have a deterrent effect, because as long as there's this like de facto immunity or slap on the wrist, you're going to see a lot of people that are out there that view this as like LARPing. Oh, it's fun. Just go on the ground. And if you get caught, so what? You get released the next day. Maybe you get probation for a year or something. No big deal. 100 years is no joke. And it's not just that. I think the lightest sentence of those was 30 years, if I'm not mistaken. And so there were 9 people, I think, that were charged. Yeah. So a serious amount of time, even for the ones that didn't get the harshest punishment. The other thing is, of course, it's been a big pet peeve of mine, and that is, under the previous DOJ and FBI, the idea that, as we heard Chris Wray say, Antifa doesn't exist. It's just an idea. And this was always laughable. While it may be true that Antifa, it would be very similar, and excuse me, YouTube, for saying this, but like saying Nazis don't exist today. Well, just because there's not an organization that maybe directly calls themselves that, there's a bunch of branch groups that fall under that umbrella. The same with Antifa. So we have like Rose City Antifa or the John Brown Gun Club or all these other organizations that are under an umbrella of Antifa, left-wing sort of anarchist, terrorist. And to actually see them be charged, there's a lot of normies out there that until they see actual people with authority bringing the hammer down, they just buy the narrative. Well, there is no left-wing violence, or there is no Antifa. If there is, why haven't they been arrested? Why haven't they been charged? And so I think this goes a step towards legitimizing, like, yeah, of course, like we've always known, there are organized left-wing groups that seek to use terrorism to get their way.
And the thing is about these groups is that they are, Rob, to your point, highly organized. And when we get into the second indictment, there's going to even be more on this. But these groups have been using, encrypted communications, comms, operational security, training. They develop logistics and supply chains. And yes, there are sub-chapters which are loosely affiliated. So like they might, it might be like X, Y, and Z gun club or a book club, or they have a name, right?
Yep.
But that doesn't mean they're not part of a larger operational system on the ground. It's almost like maybe the best analogy that I could give, though I think it gives them too much credit because it sounds too manly and cool, is like if you watch like a show like Sons of Anarchy, right? And you think about like biker gangs, right? They're all loosely under the same umbrella, but they're all chapters are all their own and very different, right? That's much more how it seems to be. Like, okay, there's a collective here, and maybe these ones are communists, and maybe these other ones are anarchists. But if at trial, they, like one of the text messages that they used is for example, for those of you who don't speak Antifa, Black Bloc Antifa. The Black Bloc is like the guys who show up with the black masks and the black outfit and are the most violent, most disruptive ones. One of them was saying the Black Bloc is like Tor. The more people using it, the better it becomes. Everyone should use it. We don't need black flags when we are a sea of black blocks. The key strategy is to be water, aka stay mobile, stay disruptive. Your gear should help maximize that, talking about shields and knee pads and stuff to bring. So the idea that this was not an organized group of Antifa sympathizers when they're talking about we need more Black Bloc Antifa, it's kind of a joke. So like this is obviously the case, but then they committed serious crimes, Rob. Like these weren't like
they shot in an officer, hit him in the neck. Yeah, I mean
let me just read you the list of convictions. They got rioting, providing material support to terrorists. We should circle back to that because that's very important. Conspiracy to use and carry an explosive, using and carrying an explosive, attempted murder of federal officers and employees of the United States, discharging a firearm during in relation to and in furtherance of a crime of violence, corruptly concealing records, and conspiracy to conceal documents. So, yes, you could say like, oh, the last ones, the cover-up crimes are not violent, whereas the first ones are. But attempted murder of a federal officer and providing material support to terrorists and rioting, these are not minor offenses.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And look, to go back to your biker analogy, this is something it's, I talk about this tweet from Millennial Woes a lot, which he says, so much of arguing with the left is them pretending to not understand things, thus making discourse impossible. So much of it when having this discussion of Antifa, the two most common commentary that I get that's just laughable is, well, they're anti-fascist because they call themselves that. As if a white supremacist group labels themselves the We Love Puppies Club, you could be like, wait, why do you hate puppies? You're against them? Like, it's that level of stupidity. But the one that's a little more serious, that's a joke, is the idea that they don't have like an organizational structure. Well, this isn't uncommon in the terrorist world, right? Like, for example, it's less like I know what you're talking about with like the motorcycle gangs, but a lot of the motorcycle clubs, they take minutes at meetings. They have officers. A lot of these groups aren't like that. They're more set up like Al-Qaeda or ISIS or Al-Nusra, where it's like you just have little cells. And there might not be a president of the John Brown Gun Club, right? It's just like a group that people come and you're de facto leaders and stuff like that. But we didn't keep minutes. We didn't keep a corporate account, for the organization. So therefore, we're not an organization. And that's laughable. When you compare that to other groups that are more structured, like, I hate to do this to bring them up in comparison, but the left would do this, like the Proud Boys. The Proud Boys were like an open organization that they weren't seeking to hide their identity as terrorists because they were like a fun-loving organization that just said, fuck it, we're going to fight against the radical left. So the message was always to me like, so let me get this straight. If you have an organization, like let's say you have a branch of the Tea Party, and then you go to a rally and they start, some lefties start some shit and fisticuffs get exchanged, you could be like, hypothetically, they could be a terrorist organization because we think they use violence and they're organized and they keep minutes. But the left-wing groups that exist solely to start this shit because they're like more amorphous. They're like, oh, well, there's nothing we could do. It's just an idea. And it was always laughable and was an excuse at the highest levels, including at the FBI, to not investigate left-wing groups like this. And there's been a lot. It's not just Antifa groups. I would say the same of Black Lives Matter groups. We saw these rallies again and again result in prepared violence, not spontaneous, prepared violence. We saw training being given through Telegram groups, through in-person training that we've had reports over and over going back over a decade, that they're training in this black bloc. They're training in other sort of confrontational tactics to create flashpoints. So it's nice to finally see the first big case actually result not just in a conviction, which was good news back in March, but a serious sentencing that really sends. And I'll give you the last word on this. And I think the other case is arguably more interesting because of what it signifies might be coming in the future.
Yeah, and it responds to a few of the criticisms you raised. So I think it's very much worth getting into that case. The thing about that, just on the last word on the Prairie Land issue, it can be painful to say let the process unfold because it's so slow and our politics are so fast. Right. Yeah. But you got to remember the indictment in the Prairie Land case, that was like fall 2025. I think it was a few months ago. Right. Yeah. Then they had the trial. Then they had the sentencing. Like this took a period of months. Like, it's not days or weeks. It's months. Sometimes it's years to bring a good case to fruition. And, I think that sometimes when you rush it, you bring a lot of bad cases and then you lose a lot of bad cases and you just get egg on your face and you look inept. The thing about what Trump did and the Trump DOJ did here is that they connected the dots legally well. Remember back in I forgot when it was, Trump put out that executive order that declared that Antifa was a domestic terrorist organization. Yeah. So, what's that for? Well, now they got charged with, and a jury convicted them of, so a jury believed this to be true, with providing material support to a terrorist organization. And then at sentencing, the judge has discretion. The judge could say, it's called concurrent or consecutive sentences. Like let's say you get sentenced to like 15 years, 5 years, and 10 years. The judge could say they all run at the same time. So 15, 5, and 10 actually just takes 15 to get through it all. Or the judge could say they're consecutive. So you stack them one after the other, and 15, 10, and 5 becomes 30. Here, the judge chose to stack them, in part because it's Texas, but in part because the judge was like, not only did you shoot a cop, you were part of a terrorist organization who planned to shoot a cop, and you brought gear, and you were leading like revolutionaries who were attempting. So I'm gonna give you the maximum. I'm gonna give you the maximum I can give you, and that's the Trump DOJ actually executing a long-term strategy well, right? And I think we should highlight the W there, because it's easy to bag on them sometimes. You and I have had a lot of shows where we've been like, God, these fucking clowns. How they can't fucking tie their shoelaces. They can't walk and chew bubble gum. How are they going to fuck up this indictment and this indictment and this indictment, right? And there's this endless clown show. But this was done well. This was done well from top to bottom. And I think that that's something that should be flagged as we go into the midterms, and people are saying like, well, are they going to fucking do anything about Antifa? And it's like, yeah, they are. They are.
Yeah. And look, I'm as much as anyone critical of what I see, because I think there was an appalling lack of this in the first Trump administration. Mm-hmm. However, two things to say about that real quick. One, a lot of the most ridiculous radical left-wing violence came at the tail end of the Trump administration in the first time, and he's also dealing with COVID. So there's a lot of crazy shit happening at the same time, and you really didn't have time maybe to build a case. The other thing that's worth saying is, like, because of, maybe this is unique to me, but we'll see what your audience thinks of this. I feel that at least Trump and many of his supporters, myself included, think that there is a total mess in our federal government. And so there's a lot of things that he has to do. He has to secure the border. He has foreign policy things, not all of which I agree with, that he feels are a priority. You know, the tariffs, the economic thing like that. So oftentimes the priorities that I might have where it's like, I want these fuckers arrested, like what's going on? It might take a lot of time to get there, because it's not like, it's like, well, this is it. This is the singular focus, right? Like, forget about everything else. We're just focused on radical left-wing terrorism. So I agree with you. Although, you know, ultimately, and we'll get to the second case here, I hope that we get bigger fish, so to speak, because I think there's a lot of serious people connected to this that are providing material support. I think that you're right, that we should celebrate when we actually see things that people like me have been saying. We want to see corruption and violence from the left be treated seriously. And instead of just always, you know, kicking rocks and pouting and saying, it's never enough, it's not enough, it's not enough, I think we should celebrate when it's something.
Especially when the strategy is executed well. Like because of the terrorism executive order, the prosecutors were allowed to ask for the maximum sentence and asked for for stacking and having them run consecutively. And then the judge was persuaded that in fact this was terrorism and sentenced accordingly. Right. So this is like strategy at the executive, at the president level,
right,
then being carried out by prosecutors at the line level, being, you know, emphasized by the AUSA within Texas, the broader DOJ. This is, you know, it's good to see the administration hitting on cylinders and functioning, right? And it makes me hopeful that when they prosecute the next one, they're going to do a good job, because the next one, as we're going to talk about, is going to be tougher because it's going to be a Minnesota jury, not a Texas jury.
Now, the one thing I'll say in this case specifically, I don't think that they take a victory lap as much as they should. I think oftentimes with the narrative, they rely on the media. Had this been the opposite, for example, had this been a right-wing organization under the Biden administration that would have been arrested, it would have been the major story on the Sunday news programs. New York Times would have been running front-page pieces on it. Here, it's not really being celebrated. The ball's not being spiked. If I'm Trump's team or Republicans, I'm out there aggressively going after Democrats. Like, these are the types of people you're supporting that are attacking ICE. How do you answer for that? That you're inspiring people like this. So we'll read some super chats real quick. Remember, if you have any super chat whatsoever, we promise we will read them. Especially, we like to hear the ones that are relevant to the conversation. So any questions, comments you have. Hellstorm real quick on my end says free chat. Limit 1, not one step back. Thank you so much. Then we have Holiday as a new member. Thank you. On your end, Jefferson, $2 says, where does parole figure into a 100-year sentence?
Great question, Jefferson. Jefferson's always on the ball.
Yes, he is.
So in federal court, you basically don't get parole. It essentially doesn't exist. You can get some credit for time served for good behavior, but that's a pretty minor thing. So when you get federal time, you tend to serve the federal time by and large. Now, the only way I could really see these people not serving close to the entire time that they're sentenced for would be, obviously they die before 100 years is up,
Right.
would be if a future Democratic president pardoned them, because these are federal crimes. So there could be a pardon in the future if they were trying to do some kind of like Trump pardoned the J6ers, we're going to pardon the Antifa people thing. That's what I would watch out for, but otherwise they're doing the time.
Yeah. And that's what I had read as well. Like it's different. The federal aspect of it makes it different than what you hear a lot of these, like particularly left-wing states, where you hear these sentences that seem lengthy, and then all of a sudden you're like, "Ah, but the devil's in the detail. There's an option for parole in a year and a half or something like that." So, and Jefferson on my end, $2 says water was part of a Mao quote on Revolutionary.
Of course it was. Of course it was.
Truth Revolt TV, $5 says Antifa equals anti-First Amendment. That's a good way of putting it. We were, I was actually talking a little this week about anti-fascista and the extravaganza we were talking about, the German beginnings of it, communist in nature is what they were started off as, and I think still are largely. But now this second case, I have the actual DOJ news blurb that they put out. I'll bring this up real quick. We'll just read it real brief, and then you could talk about this. I think this is exactly the type of thing that I was looking for, and I think you could really talk about what the potential significance, other than just these 15 members, are. But here from June 16th is the blurb that's put out. 15 members of Direct Action Minnesota, a Minneapolis, I know I say that word wrong, to hell with you people, based direct action group with Antifa ties indicted. Charges include conspiracy to impede or injure a federal officer, interstate stalking, interstate threats, solicitation to commit a crime of violence, and assaults on federal officers. Just real quick, it says the Justice Department today announced 15 members associated with DAM have been charged with various federal crimes, including the ones listed above. Over the last 24 hours, federal agents with Homeland Security conducted a coordinated law enforcement operation culminating in the arrest of 12 members. 2 members are at large, 1 previously in federal custody under separate charges. It goes on to speak about how the investigation's ongoing, and I think what really stands out here is this was an operation, you correct me if I'm wrong about this, that seems to have been pretty considerable and ongoing. And so it's not something that they just took a week to do. This is part of a long-term operation, and they seem pretty hopeful that it's going to get more people involved in the organization, the planning of anti-law enforcement actions in places like Minnesota, and presumably, possibly in the rest of the United States.
Yeah, this is the one that made me say, oh, Rob's going to be so happy, because we were on this show and we were going back and forth about like, oh, should they, you were saying they should arrest everybody who's at this barrier. And I was saying, you're never going to get conviction. What they should be doing, if I was at the DOJ, what I would be doing is trying to crack their signal chat. Yep. Get their communications, figure out who's organizing this, who's funding it, and go after the people who are doing that. And lo and behold, holy shit, not only were they doing it, they were well along their way of doing it. Because if you read the indictment, and by the way, there's a great video on my channel where me, potentially criminal Sean, and average female debater go through most of the indictment in excruciating detail if you really want to see every single little dirty fact. But they have, Rob, they have the entire signal chat. Like this is a 95-page indictment, and most of it is quotes, direct quotes of what so-and-so said on what day. So the only way they could feel, like, imagine, like, this is a court document. You can't just make stuff up. If you put it in there and you can't prove it later, this is very embarrassing for you. So if they're going to put a direct quote into the document, the reason they feel comfortable putting a direct quote in is that they have it in writing. They have it in writing. It's on social media or it's in the signal chat. And they broke the signal chat, or they got it through subpoenas, or they got it from the ISP, or they got it from the phone. We don't know how they did it, but they have it. And they have all the communications between these various groups. And here we have exactly what we were describing in Texas. We have this one group that you described there, but also the Black Cat Workers Collective, a few others that were working together towards the goal of making law enforcement at the Whipple Ice Center in Minnesota impossible. Just making it absolutely impossible. We can get into the weeds on that, but this is the big news to me. They have the chats, and if I'm reading between the lines correctly, Rob, they have cooperating witnesses. They flipped at least one person because they have information about in-person meetings. They're describing like organizational meetings, what people said, who said it and when, and like how do they know that if they don't have somebody in the room to tell them? It reads to me like they cracked their communications and they flipped one or two people, and this could develop further.
Yeah, I mean, so one of the things that's odd about sort of this is it seems that we've had reporting on things like this in the past, including in the first Trump administration. In this case, I think you had people like Cam Higbee and Nick Shirley and others that were in these Telegram groups, because there are ways that you could get in these groups. And there were, at least, I'm not saying these exact ones, let me be clear, right? So, but there were Telegram groups with thousands upon thousands of people that were communicating things like ice spotters that were saying, hey, we need someone at 4th and Broadway, get down there fast, right? And you had these thousands of people. And you had people like Cam Higbee that were showing you screenshots of these, right? And where they were seeing their own vehicles showing up on these Telegram channels. Hey, Cam Higbee or Nick Shirley or whoever's in this vehicle, if you see this plate. And so it was very frustrating to be like, how can we see this on X, but law enforcement can't? And the answer is, well, they were. They were seeing it. And what's interesting is, this is just 15 people. I think if you're reading between the lines, as you said there is a potential that there could be a slew of people beyond this. And there were all sorts of things that I'll be interested to see, such as maybe more high profile people, and not necessarily high profile in the sense of like a senator or something, but there were allegations that it seemed that the Telegram group had technology that you would expect from law enforcement, such as the ability to read license plates and know who they were registered to. And there were accusations that there were possibly local politicians like town council members, etc. So my guess would be that, you tell me if I'm wrong about this. Let's say hypothetically that there is an attempt to build a bigger case to get more people. Usually the way you would do is you'd get the people that it's just black and white. Look, plain as day, we have your records. You're calling for the most heinous things, simple case. You bring them in first. Then you continue to build that case as it gets up the food chain, and you're trying to get these people maybe to flip or maybe to get your ducks in a row, so that when you're getting maybe the more complicated or the high profile people, you sort of already set a precedent that you have the building blocks for a case like this.
Yeah, well, you definitely want to flip witnesses. You definitely want to build a case and get people who are lower hanging fruit, willing to make a deal, get them to flip. And then you got to see where the facts lead you. Right? Like, it's always important to remember that law enforcement is, they're hiding their cards until the indictment. So we don't know what they're doing behind closed doors. So, this is speculative. But like here, for example, one of the allegations that was very shocking was that amongst the coordinations of these Antifa cells is that they had full-time staff who were writing down the license plate of every vehicle that left the ICE facility. And then they were compiling like their own DMV with a database of make, model, license plate for all these cars. Then they would run a hot list, meaning a list of cars that were out on the street that day, as opposed to the master list, so that people could follow those cars. And they would then communicate about who was in the car. Do they think they're picking up people? Are they making arrests? They would call them kidnappings, not arrests, by the way. But are they making arrests? Are they taking people back? What are they doing? This level of coordination could mean a lot of things. Like, did they have access to government level resources? it is possible. It's also possible that they built their own little DMV with all the time and energy they were spending on it. But then that raises the question of like, how were they paying for all of this? Where's the money coming from? Where's the people? Don't these people have jobs? Don't they have to work? Like what's happening that these people have all this money and time to stalk ICE agents? Which, by the way, that's the allegation. That's not my word for it. One of the crimes here is stalking federal officers and recording what they're doing. So there's a support network there that's going to be interesting to unpack. And these guys, Rob, did take meeting minutes to your comment earlier. In this case, they actually did have meetings and they have messages about how to apply and what they did. They were doing like Monday Night Football. They were watching videotape about how we could be more disruptive next time. So there's an organization here is the point. And when you have the organization, you can start flipping people in the organization. And then the question is, do you get somebody who's willing to say, oh, there's nobody left in the organization to flip on, but I know somebody in another organization, right? And then you're in business.
So again, I'll say this as I did with the previous case. I would like to see the Trump administration putting more sort of effort into the narrative, because as we speak, there's still a universal acceptance amongst Democrats that like, the protests against ICE are almost all peaceful, and there's some real shady shit going on behind the scenes and real damage that's being done to actual officers. And so I would like to see Trump and company out there more. I would go further. I would see if Democrats were connected to them in any material way and keep their asses off the ballots using Section 3 of the 14th Amendment as they tried to do to Trump. Because if I'm not mistaken, that court ruled that it was sort of enforcing that against the president that made it unique. They didn't really weigh in on whether or not it was an insurrection or, right? So I would say turnabout's fair play on that. But all criticisms aside, I think this is exactly the type of thing that I was looking for. I hope that it continues and that it ultimately, what you would like to see is that it dissuades people from doing these sorts of things in the future. If the left wants to win, then win at the ballot box. Don't win because you think every time you lose, you could use violence and intimidation. So you would like to see that. We have some super chats if you like. Look at this monster on your end.
Oh,
K-Bell, $50 says, I remember when Antifa first started to become a mainstream media news. There was a Holocaust survivor that said they remind her of the brown shirts from 30s Germany. Ever since then, I see them meeting in their safe houses with Australian painter uniforms. Austrian, I assume you mean.
Yeah.
Well, it's like not to get into too much, but Antifascistas started and they actually aligned themselves with that Austrian Painters Party. That's actually true. They were more concerned with going after like what we would consider like the liberal Democrats. That was the group that they first saw as a big threat to them because they were sort of radical, more communist types. So yeah, it's not a surprise that this group that at one point aligned themselves with that will be doing those sorts of things.
And this idea that these are like harmless college kids doing peaceful protests. I mean, Rob, can I just read you a paragraph from this?
You want me to bring it up?
I have it up on my screen. This is paragraph 89 of the indictment, and I'll show you something after. So this is paragraph 89. This is Kennedy is one of the people who got indicted. On or about February 5th, 2026, Kennedy posted on Facebook, so not even privately, on Facebook, quote, I swear I'm going to lose my fucking mind if I see that, quote, if 3.5% of the population is committed to peaceful revolution, they win bullshit. It's gone too far. Too many well-meaning people and fake-ass ideas of what it takes to win. It has folks attacking militant elements of the resistance and aiding the state against them because they think violence or even property destruction is counter-revolutionary. They could not be more wrong. I want to make this as clear as I can. Please remember, YouTube, I am quoting someone else. This is not me. I want to make this as clear as I can in all caps. You will never win with nonviolence alone. Ever. No one has, no one will. You absolutely need militants to win. I'm sorry the world is cruel, but this is the real world, not a fucking fairy tale. End quote. So that's paragraph 89 of 95 pages of quotes of these people's own words and what they said and did, and evidence that the government will prove up during the course of the trial, or will attempt to prove up, I should say. But what I'm saying is that's one paragraph.
Yep.
And if you just read that one paragraph to someone and then say, well, do you think this Antifa kid is into nonviolent protest? Like, it's a joke. Like, like they're openly calling for political violence, And I think people are not, I was unaware of how metastasized this has gotten until I read this indictment. I found it shocking. I couldn't believe it was this brazen and open.
Well, I mean, didn't you just debate someone that said that it's time for assassinations against tyrannical administration? So the problem is, what happens is, talking about metastasizing, what happens is this sort of mindset's allowed to go on without punishment for so long that it works its way into the mainstream. Like, all of a sudden, it's like a game, and you have people that are saying, of course, why wouldn't you use this violence? Maybe once people start getting huge sentences, convictions and huge sentences, people will think twice before they flippantly call for violence, particularly in the forms of like assassinations or attacking law enforcement like we're seeing here. I assure you, the people on the left would freak the hell out if they heard right-wing groups that were attacking law enforcement on a regular basis, like we've seen in Minnesota. They would freak out. And if they found messages like this that the government was putting out, they would point this as the proof as how despicable the right is. Odorant de Mutant, $10 on my end, says, Ryan, I'm shocked you're working with someone like Rob. Someone with so many huge skeletons being dug up lately. Shame on you associating for the charlatan. Hashtag Dinogate. Alex Bones was right. I have no comment on the Dinogate. My attorneys have told me to stay silent on the issue, so I'll be staying. Meanwhile, half the people on your channel is like, what the hell is going on here?
No, Rob. Everyone knows about fucking Dinogate. Don't you try to squirm like my audience doesn't know about how you grifted those poor dinosaur enthusiasts.
Yeah, it was not good. Jefferson on your end says, Q potentially criminal ranting about proper OPSEC.
Yeah.
yes, absolutely.
So I joke about this, but my buddy Sean, like if you watch my channel, it's law with a side of philosophy. If you watch Sean's channel, it's law with a side of like military operations and deep cut military. So when we went through this indictment, Sean was like losing his shit because he's like, they're doing OPSEC. And he's like breaking down all the different militant tactics that they're using, which is very educational for me. Like, here's something I didn't get that Sean immediately picked up on. There's all these texts about them like, we need leaf blowers and we need traffic cones. And I'm like, what? Well, that's so fucking weird. Why do they need that? Sean instantly was like, because they're gonna get tear gassed.
Yep.
And they put the cone on it and then they blow it away with the leaf blower. And I was like, oh shit. Like, but that's just kind of like a minor vantage point into the mindset of these people where they're like, we are planning to engage the cops in enough of a offensive military fashion that we are designing countermeasures for when they try to break up our riot. Like, we want a riot and we want to stay rioting. And like, it's wild stuff. I mean, can you pull up this image?
Mm-hmm.
Have you seen one of these?
Yeah, on D-Day.
This is called a Czech hedgehog, right? The idea is that you weld together pieces of metal into a shape that makes it so like any vehicle that hits it is going to be disabled. In addition to training with shields, disruption, stalking the police, keeping logs of law enforcement vehicles, they wanted to limit the ability of law enforcement to leave the facility. That way they could funnel them and they could keep track of them or prevent them from doing things altogether. Now, you and I remember, Rob, we talked about how forcibly obstructing law enforcement is a federal crime. And I said, just putting your body in the way could be enough. They were building these fuckers.
Yep.
They were building Czech hedgehogs and deploying them around the ICE facility.
Well, you saw it in New York.
Peaceful protest. Like, what the fuck is this?
They would actually take the fencing that like law enforcement would set out during the day. Then they would take it and build structures like this, and they would place it right outside the facility there. And I think it was Newark. They were doing this when the last time we were streaming, and I was, I was showing video every night of like they do this, then they put their, law enforcement tries to move them and they try to scooch the video or the vehicles out, and then people are getting in front of them. Yeah, it's certainly planned, because think about it this way, right? Let's say me and you just get furious about something, like law enforcement's doing something. We're like, we're getting our neighbors and we're going down there. We probably wouldn't have the wherewithal to have like sophisticated planning like that. We'd just be there like shaking our fists yelling, right? But you see these people and it's like, maybe not, it's not to the level of like our military, but it's certainly tactics that are military-esque. Like there are people in defined rules that have defined things that they're doing. And you can tell that there is planning behind this. This is not just spontaneous, hey, there's some barrels, throw them in front of here. This is someone directing, here's what we need to do. Set these up here. Create obstructions here. Do something over here. Move the movement over here because law enforcement's coming here. It's like counter movements you see. Law enforcement comes in with tear gas here. They'll move over here and do something. This is coordinated. This isn't just a mob that came together and is making spontaneous action.
What it is it's a coordinated cell that uses the useful idiots as cover, right? Because like, I'm not saying that everybody who's showing up to protest is one of these fucking Antifa militants. They're not. I'm sure there's a lot of like bored college kids who legit are just there protesting and doing like college kid shit. But they, as useful idiots, form the screen that obfuscates these ops. And these ops are, I mean, I was stunned by how coordinated it was, Rob. Like they were talking about like, they had people who were doing operations. So picking people up, dropping them off, where are the vehicles going to be? What are your escape? Like, they had rally points. They had places to go up this trail and change your clothes if something happens. Like, how do you get out of the situation at the end? They rated different jobs by risk of arrest. Like, okay, we need a driver. Is this a higher risk job or a lower risk job? What's the risk here so we can assign it to people? They had people who were doing logistics, who were moving the shields that they use to combat the cops. They were to bring the shields in. They had places where they were training people in formations and drills to use the shields. They had woodworkers who were making the shields, and they had different people who were talking about the virtues of wood versus PVC versus different materials for the shields and how best to go about doing it. They had people who were logging the cops, people who were following the cop cars, people who were running operationals on the back end. Then, when they came time to obstruct the law enforcement officers, they had people doing soft obstruction. Like we're protesting, we're getting in your way, but we're not trying to push the envelope. And then they had designated heavies. They had people who were doing hard obstruction, who were there with the shields and were to set up like the actual line. They talked about the need to lure the cops out of their strength area, like by the facility, to then be more disruptive somewhere else. Like the level of coordination that some of these groups were deploying was wild. Fundraising, who's paying for what, where's the money coming from? They kept meeting minutes. This was tightly organized at the level of these maximally disruptive cells. And seeing that, I'm hoping that some of the useful idiot college kids go, oh shit, I should be careful about who I'm chatting with and whether I'm going to this protest and whether or not I'm affiliating with these people. Like, some of these people are not your friends. They're not college kids protesting. Like, they're bad news. And if you go down the rabbit hole with them, you could be facing 100 years in prison one of these days. Yeah. So I'm hoping that people see this and go, oh shit, like this is something bigger and darker than I was expecting.
Drew K on my end says $5, thank you, says they should have been charged with sedition and do the same to any politicians who were found to have known about it and supported it. Jacob Fry. Look, sedition aside, like, I will die on this hill. The proof that they had that Donald Trump engaged in an insurrection, there's far better proof that Democratic politicians, particularly at the local level, have engaged in this insurrection that we see going on the left. And there's no one talking about it. You can't sit there and watch the overwhelming amount of violence and obstructive against law enforcement and continue to say, like, oh, this is all good and law enforcement's evil. Again, they set up the tactics that would create flashpoints. They say this in the Telegram channels, knowing that it eventually would lead to murders. Because if you have enough violent confrontations with law enforcement, whether it be ICE or the NYPD or state troopers, if you set up enough violent confrontations, inevitably there will be someone who gets injured or loses their life. And the point is, they'll take that to say, see, look how bad they are. And the Democrats have ran with it. Forget about, look at Renee Good. Renee Good is, it's terrible as it is. I don't want anyone to lose their life. That was not a bad or an unlawful shoot. That was someone, maybe she panicked, but she was using her vehicle as a weapon and hit law enforcement who, to defend his life, fired back. They didn't give a shit. They're like, that was murder. They gaslit a woman. They encouraged her to go do those actions and got exactly what they wanted, which was she's dead. And now we could use her as a martyr to continue to attack law enforcement, both through narrative channels, legal channels, and through the brown shirts on the street. So a good start in unraveling is those people that are planning, coordinating the most violent and obstructive things should be punished. But I absolutely agree that they should take this to the highest level. At least if they don't charge it legally, they need to be out there winning the information battle. Like, this is what these Democrats like Jacob Fry are defending. This action that we see right here.
Well, and the thing that I think gets lost when you talk about Renee Good, and I know I've talked about it a few times, so I apologize if people are hearing me play the organ here, but some of the blood is on the hands of the local politicians who denied local police support.
Yep.
Because federal officers cannot enforce local law in most jurisdictions. In most jurisdictions, they can't enforce traffic. They can enforce federal law. So once you start obstructing them, they can arrest you or make you move. But they can't see you jaywalking or see, for example, Renee Good making multiple moving violations with her car and just say, you get a ticket. We're pulling you over because you're driving like an idiot. Here's your ticket, go home. If someone had done that to Renee Good, if there had been a local police officer to say, ma'am, you're using your car illegally, I'm going to give you a $200 ticket. If you don't go home, I'm arresting you. She'd be alive today.
Yep. Totally agree.
So, this is what happens when the local politicians are attempting to maximize the friction.
Well, they want it. Yeah,
minimize.
That's right. Yeah. This is something they wanted, in my opinion. But on your end again, Cable.
Whoa, Cable. Cable, my new best friend. Look at this guy.
It says, this also reminds me back to the 2000 gangs were sending members to join the military and learn combat tactics. They'd get out and teach everyone else. There was a time police had issues dealing with them, so ex-military teaching them possible. Yeah, there's been reports I've seen of people that have infiltrated these groups saying they're ex-military. In fact, one mainstream media outlet ran a report about this guy that was ex-military that was paid basically by our intel and went in and infiltrated this Antifa group and was they have people in there that are military that are explaining to them military tactics. And this was all reported in Time magazine or something like this a year and a half ago. I remember covering it. So yeah, it's absolutely true that there could be people with a knowledge of military tactics and urban warfare that are informing this,
Well, and not only that, what you saw in the indictment was that there were a lot of out-of-towners. There were people there's one example that's coming to my mind who was from they sent some messages back and forth by the way, one of the groups here was called the Black Cat Workers Collective, and they're overtly communist, so they use a lot of comrade. So it's oh, I got a comrade coming from California, but they've been involved in X, Y, and Z thing. I'd like to get them hooked up into operations, right? So there's not only are there people coming from out of state to be professional disruptors and just to be part of the gang, right? They're not organic in that sense. There's also knowledge transfer where they're bringing in people who can train other people in how to do things. They're teaching people how to run the operations side, how to run the communication side, how to run the logistics side. So you get yes, there's the first generation of trainers who maybe were ex-military or maybe were, militia or like however they got this expertise. But now they've trained people who are training people, right? So it becomes self-replicating.
Yeah, it's absolutely. It's just, it really is. It's amazing that it's been able to get this far. But Jefferson, on my end, $2 says cameras in federal court would help the narrative. Totally agree.
It would.
I think that's something. Old Snipper, $10 says, love you, Rob and Ryan. Are there any conspiracy theories that you guys believe? Well, yes, like we have a lot to get to today. I'll just say this. The word conspiracy theorist is pejorative now, obviously. But when you think about what a conspiracy is, which is just a collective of individuals coming together for some sort of corrupt purpose, clearly there's all sorts of things. Like I believe in this conspiracy theory that there are many people in the halls of Congress that engage in insider trading. And they purposely don't want to crack down because everybody's sort of turning their head because they don't want someone on their side or their friend or their coworker to get in trouble. That's a conspiracy theory, I believe. And there's various more that I could get into, but sure.
I mean, I think this would get called a conspiracy theory, but maybe it's just so obvious that people would be clear that it's not a conspiracy. Whenever people leave office, like Obama's, the Clintons, right? Like they're worth X amount of dollars. And then within 15, 20 years, they're worth 70 million more. How did that happen? It's because they know damn well that when they leave office, their donors are going to pay them between $15,000 and $50,000 a speech or a handshake event for the rest of their lives, so that they are going to become multiple millionaires quickly, easily, and instantly guaranteed. And they know that while they're in office. They know it while they're in office, and they know who's going to be giving them the money while they're in office. So, I mean, maybe that's not a conspiracy. Maybe that's super obvious, but I feel like that's a thing that we don't talk about very often as a society, because we'll talk about it with Trump sometimes. We'll say like, oh, he's doing the crypto thing. And it's like, yeah, I actually am pretty critical of the crypto thing, and I have been critical of it, but I'm not sure how different that is than, the guarantee that you're going to be paid $50 million by your Wall Street friends when you leave office. Seems pretty similar, actually.
I also, I hesitate. I have to be careful to talk about this, but I do feel there's something to the conspiracy that this company, InGen, is running unsafe dinosaur theme parks and putting out faulty dino analyzer equipment. But I can't talk about it right now. But that is a conspiracy that I do.
Yeah, there's another conspiracy I heard of, Rob, where this blameless company, InGen, is being slandered by a hillbilly.
I don't know what you're talking about. I've never heard that bullshit. Bullshit. Everybody's litigious nowadays. Red Con Hazard, $5 says the Black Bloc bike lock basher, I remember this, in 2017 was a college teacher who was teaching his students from the Antifa handbook. Antifa's been around for decades plus. Yeah. So I don't know if many of you know this, but Antifa's been a real big open problem in Europe for a long time, even more so in a big way, and some real heinous shit. And clearly those tactics came to the United States and have been here for a while. And then Cavell, one more time on your side for $5, says, as an add-on, if they were ex-military, it's people that learned how insurgency works firsthand by fighting in Iraq, Afghanistan. Absolutely.
Likely.
So, look, we could talk about this on another show. This might take up the entirety of the show, but believe it or not.
Can I pull up one thing? Just
sure.
I do want to. I know, the thing about the Antifa thing is, you and I could do a whole special on the Antifa thing, and we'd just be here for 5 hours. I know. I think I went 3.5 hours on just the Antifa indictment because there's so much information.
Yep.
But I was going to highlight one thing. It'd be this thing. If you could pull up my share screen.
I absolutely can. There we go.
We were talking about how do they get the organization? How do they bring it all together? How do they bring it home? Is it RICO? What the government did, which is they charged under 18 USC 372 conspiracy to impede or injure an officer. And what's interesting about this is that federal conspiracy law is very, very broad. If you agree to be part of the criminal conspiracy, you agree that you're part of the purpose, you're now liable for the whole conspiracy. Everything that the conspiracy is doing can be pinned on you, as long as the conspiracy took an overt act in order to accomplish its ends. So this language, which I want to highlight, is broad. If two or more persons in any blah, blah, blah conspire to prevent by force, intimidation, or threat any person from accepting or holding any office or trust, place any of confidence under the United States, or from discharging any duties thereof, right? So if two or more persons by force or intimidation or threat conspire to prevent a federal officer from discharging their duties thereof, right, then you can be held liable for not more than 6 years. Now, what's incredible about this as a tool is if you join a Signal chat with one of these, I'm not talking about like these college protesters, but like you're in the Black Cat Workers Collective, you're in one of these like cells, and they're talking about, we got to have hard blockades and soft blockades and leaf blowers, and who's going to weld the hedgehogs and who's making the shields. Oh, hey, you, new guy, are you in? And you say yes, 6 years.
Yep.
6 years, right? And they obviously have the Signal chats. So if I, not that I want to give a lot of advice here, but if I were a wannabe Antifa member, I'd be thinking, holy fuck, this is a bad idea. Because just engaging with these militant cells in their operational activities where they're attempting to threaten and impede federal law enforcement could get you 6 years for manning the communications device. It could get you 6 years for driving the truck, for dropping off the leaf blowers and shit, right? Like you could get 6 years and not be the guy who's hitting the cops with the pipe or the shield, right? This is important because this is how you flip people, right? Like, hey man, I know you weren't the guy. I know you weren't there bashing the cop over the head with the metal barrier. I know that wasn't you, but you agreed to help him. We have your communications. We have your Signal chat. You agreed to help him. That's 6 years. You want to do 6 years?
Well, my advice to those people is contact law enforcement and turn state's witness now, right? Before you get caught up in this, and don't get involved in this stuff. It's the same thing I said. I obviously have no love for the left. I want to seek to destroy their ideas everywhere possible. But as far as the people, listen, this is no joke. Same on the right. It's no fucking joke. You're going to be away from your family. You think that these people on the left think it's fun and games, it's LARPing, let's go have a black bloc party, ha ha ha. They get to pretend, there's this euphoria of pretending that you're in the modern civil rights movement. Go to prison. That's what's going to happen. And it's no joke. And look, I don't mean to make any aspersions on this particular show. I'll happily make them on my own channel. But let's be honest, a lot of these people aren't going to thrive in a prison setting. And, so it's no joke. I hear the tough guys online, now it's the time to break the law. Now it's the time to use violence and blah, blah, blah. If you go to prison for this shit, it ain't going to be a joke. And, that's what needs to start happening. These people to be held accountable. So hopefully we could curb this. But look, like I said, we could talk about this for a long time. We have so much more to get to. Like, believe it or not, we have about 4 different broad topic areas to get through. This was one. And we've already gone 1 hour. So let's talk about the second topic that we had to talk about. It's a broad category. So there's been a lot since our last show. There have been a lot of decisions that have came out of the Supreme Court, especially yesterday and today. What are the ones that stand out to you as wins for the current Trump administration?
Yeah. Well, I mean, and just to, for the people who are going to ask, and just get this out of the way, we don't have birthright citizenship yet. That's probably tomorrow.
Yep.
They could delay it, I guess, but most people think it's going to be tomorrow. So, we'll see, because I think that's going to be the story that dwarfs all the other stories. But we got some big ones. We got some big cases. The TPS case, Nome v. National TPS Alliance et al. Came out recently. And for those of you who remember this case, the question here was, is the Trump administration allowed to terminate temporary protective status programs. These are the programs that gave compassionate immigration to people from places like Haiti or Syria, when, by the way, legitimately terrible things happened in those countries, like horrible earthquakes, civil wars, the worst things you can imagine happened. But these were temporary programs. They were designed to last for months. And in many cases, they've gone on for 20 years, some close to 30 years. And the question is the Trump administration allowed to terminate these programs? And again, I found, my mind was blown that this was a complicated legal question, because the law says the secretary has the power to terminate, and there shall be no judicial review of that determination.
In fact, we talked about that
judicial review.
We talked about that specifically on this show. Yeah. Like, we read the provision. It's like, that seems clear cut. No judicial review. And yet, a judge saw fit in a lower court to say, I disagree.
I think it was more than one. I think it was like, I don't want to swear to the number, but I think it was like up to 12 or 19, if I'm remembering correctly. Like, there were many judges who came to the conclusion that no judicial review meant judicial review.
Now, what was it 8-1, a 9-0? What was the actual? Do you have that in front of you? I know there's so many that we're going to be talking about.
Yeah, I believe. Hold on, let me pull this one up. I believe this was a 6-3, if I recall correctly. Let me just double check. Yeah, I think this was. Oh wait, I think I have the wrong. I think I have the wrong one up. I don't want to swear to that. Sorry, Rob. I'll get that for you. 1 second.
Let me.
I foolishly.
Is that Mullen versus Doe? Is that the case? It's a 6-3.
Yeah, I was reasonably certain it was a 6-3, but I pulled up the wrong case, so I was looking at the wrong one.
Now, this will be an interesting one to read the dissent, because how do they get around that? It says there's no judicial review.
Yeah, so there's two issues here that are. One, I think, is kind of laughable, and from my opinion, the other one's more constitutionally interesting. The first one is they think it says no judicial review of a determination, and the dissenters think determination is very narrow. Determination is just when the secretary said, I am terminating it. That is my determination. But the process by which she arrived at that determination is different than the determination. So they think that you get to review the process, but not the determination itself. And the majority, I think, convincingly said, hold on. It's, first of all, determination can be very broad. Like, that doesn't necessarily exclude the process. The word could be broad. But also, it's a determination with respect to, and with respect to is very broad language. So if I say to you, like, Rob, I've made a determination with respect to whether I'm going to come on the show tonight. You would think, Ryan engaged in a process that, resulted in this determination. And that's all part of the determination in respect to coming on the show. It's not totally separate things. That's pretty much the easy one. And I thought that was, it breaks on politics, I think, but that one seemed pretty clear cut to me. And if that wasn't the case, anybody could get around the judicial review bar just by claiming to target the process rather than the outcome. And the whole purpose of the judicial review bar is lost. So that was, I think, the easier issue. The tougher issue was the constitutional one. With regards to Haiti, there was an allegation that President Trump violated equal protection because he said so many things about Haiti, and that he was filled with racial animus towards the Haitians, and that he was terminating this as a result of his racial animus in violation of the Constitution. And I thought that was the tougher of the two issues.
Yeah, it's really funny, like, from a political perspective of this. It's so obvious, like, to refresh your memory, anyone who might have forgotten all those years ago in Trump's first administration, you remember there was a hot released information, by the way, this is shithead Democrats that did this, from a private conversation with Trump, released that Trump said Haiti was a shithole country, right? Now, presidents have talked like this in the past. We just haven't seen partisan releasing of their private conversation with heads of the Senate, etc. But everyone and their brother came out. You remember he had all these celebrities that were wearing shirts that were like, Haiti's a wonderful country. And how could you say that? Now the exact opposite argument's being made. How could you send these poor people back there? It's such a shithole. After being told for years we are racist for noticing. And there's other political things about this that I find laughable. One of the things you see after the ruling is you saw a bunch of people saying, but many of these people had 30-year mortgages. What? With under temporary protective status? And some bank gave them a 30-year mortgage? Sorry about your luck. I don't know what to say. That's nonsensical. And of course, because the intent was never for this to be temporary for the left, for the Democrats. The intent was always to allow these people to stay permanently or get a pathway to citizenship. And so kudos to Trump and his team for winning this case and pushing this issue, because I think this is part of his promise to deal with immigration. And these sort of loopholes where it's like temporary basically means permanent is just another way that we get screwed over, and we end up with people in this country that aren't, we may be different on what we would like to see with immigration. I think we both agree with this to the extent of whatever our immigration system should be. It should be to the benefit of the citizens of this country. And things like this, the temporary status being like, so what? Just stay forever. That's certainly not what that is. So
Wilfred Riley, he's a great author. He wrote the book "Lies My Liberal Teacher Told Me," which is really a fun read if you've never read it. But he and I do podcasts together occasionally, and he put out a great tweet earlier today where he was saying basically that like American immigration is secular. Like you have periods of big immigration numbers, which are then followed by closing down the borders and kind of brutally assimilating everybody who was let in, right? And then, once you kind of fix the culture, then you start being like, oh, immigration would be good economically. And then you're like, but there's a cycle there, right? Is the point he was making. And we're at the end of the cycle, right? Like whatever arguments you want to make about immigration being beneficial economically, I think people have realized that we're at a cultural tipping point. And what people want to do is shut it down and make sure that everybody who's going to stay here is assimilated, and that everybody has kind of an idea of what American is culturally, philosophically, and then we can talk about it down the road. But that takes 5-10 years minimum to get to that point. But what we've had instead is programs like these, which are open-ended. Like, to be clear, if you're here on TPS status, you are here illegally. If you had legal status, you can't get TPS protection. TPS is for people who are here otherwise illegally. And like you said, with a mortgage for 30 years, their kids, by the way, are birthright citizens.
Yep.
Generations of kids are birthright citizens now. This is problematic on any number of levels, because you're basically not checking immigration at all. Like in a democracy like America, it's a social compact. And the first rule of a social compact is you get to decide who the new joiners are. And the idea, I really think about this, the idea that it would be illegal for the president to end a temporary immigration program that he has full discretion over. Congress vested the executive with full discretion, no judicial review. He's not allowed to do it. Well, now then it's permanent. You're saying it's permanent at that point. Sorry, I'm ranting a little bit, but the thing that was getting me about this is that they said, and they made some clever legal arguments. I do want to credit them because some of the arguments were pretty clever. But when you bottom them out, they're saying Trump can't end the Haitian TPS program because it would have a disparate impact on a race of people. It shows his racial animus. Well, if you ever end, the reality is we don't really have TPS programs with Norway and Scandinavia and Ireland. We have TPS programs primarily with countries that are doing pretty badly. If they were rich, they would handle their own disasters. And those countries tend to have racial demographics that are what they are. Justice Alito made this point where he was like, Trump is planning to end all the TPS programs. He's not being racist. He's ending all of them. Now, most of them involve Black people, but that's because most TPS programs involve Black people. There is, I think, one TPS program, like the Syrian one, that primarily involves white people. And he's going to end that one too. It hasn't come up for termination yet. He has to wait like a couple more months. So that, like, if you can raise the specter of racism and use that specter to say that the president is now disenfranchised from ending a temporary program, then there is no way to end the program. It's impossible.
Yeah, it would only be ended when the left-wing activists decide that it's okay to end it, right? Because they'd say, well, we define ourselves as not racist. And so therefore that charge can't be levied at us.
I think
so
it's pronounced schmacist.
Yeah, schmacist, Yeah, and that's exactly it. Right, famously, almost all of the countries on Trump's original Muslim ban were on a list of countries that export terrorists under Obama. When Obama said it, not racist. When Trump says it, racist. Mm-hmm. And so, this specter of like, well, racism, therefore you can't do it. Anyways, I think this, one of the biggest wins that came out of this court. Now, we have more to get to here. I will say this. A lot of people were predicting, and I think accurately, that they were front-loading the wins, and that maybe as we got to the end cases, it wouldn't be so favorable with Trump. But that was one that came about last week, the TPS case, and that's a big one. That is absolutely a big win. It has to do with one of the key promises Trump was making with immigration. I think it's an absurd objection that these judges had that ruled that in. So I'm happy to see that went his way, because I think that it's not just good politically and good for what I want for the country, but I think it's good constitutional law as well.
And just a last footnote. I know we have so much to get to, but a last footnote on that. Justice Thomas wrote one of the most based, even for him, this was a based concurrence. And what he laid out was an argument that he supports. Now, he's laying breadcrumbs. He didn't have majority support on this. He's just laying this breadcrumbs for future courts, future lawyers. But his argument was aliens never can sue the federal government for equal protection. Never. And here was his argument, which I think was interesting. The 14th Amendment, which creates equal protection, applies to the states, not the federal government. And the 5th Amendment, which is where people think you get an equal protection claims against the federal government, comes from the 5th Amendment. The 5th Amendment doesn't have the language equal protection. What it has is the due process clause restricts the federal government's ability to deprive the people of the values in the Declaration of Independence, for those natural law enthusiasts like my channel, of natural law, life, liberty, or property. But an alien does not have a property interest in being in the United States, nor do they have a liberty interest in being in the United States, right? So his argument is, the 5th Amendment doesn't cover aliens seeking to sue for equal protection against the federal government. Therefore, such a constitutional challenge should never exist. And we shouldn't be going through this rigmarole of, was Trump being racist? It's actually totally besides the point. The whole thing is a constitutional fiction. Will people pick him up on this argument? I don't know. But he left the breadcrumbs down there. And if he's right about that, future lawyers can litigate that one, then that would change the immigration game completely, because then you wouldn't even see these kind of silly constitutional challenges.
Totally agree. Jefferson, $2 on my post, says the judges don't review, they reshmew. Oh, of course. Now I get it now. Now it all makes sense.
Yeah.
So that was the first, and I think, in my opinion, the most obvious win. Were there any other things that you saw as wins that came out of the recent cases that came about?
Yeah, Trump v. Slaughter was a big one. This was the case, this is a little bit of a deep cut for people who are into like normative politics. But for those of you who are in kind of like, the Federalist Society types, one of the big issues for originalists is unitary executive theory. The idea that the president is in charge of the executive branch, and he can't be in charge of the executive branch if his officers can do whatever they want and he can't fire them for it. So, Trump v. Slaughter was ending the line of cases that said that there's some generalizable rule where Congress can create agencies full of bureaucrats who are insulated from the president, who are insulated from politics, really. Following this case, the administrative state, in most cases, is subject to the will of the president. So if somebody at a federal agency is not doing something that the president likes, he can fire them. He can fire them. And this, by the way, Democrats will get this power too. When the next Democratic president wins, he's going to fire all the Republican agency heads. And when the Republican president wins, he's going to fire all the Democrat agency heads. But that's the way it's supposed to be. There is no fourth branch of our constitutional government. They're not insulated from politics. They're supposed to be responsive to politics. They should be responsible to the president. So this was a huge win for those of us who believe that there's been too many agencies, too much bloat on the federal government side, because now at least they are going to be reined in by a president who's accountable to the people.
Yeah, it's very interesting, right? Because I think for a normie like me, right, that you sort of assume, right? Well, particularly in an election like this one, Republicans win the presidency, they win the House, they win the Senate. You kind of have an assumption like, oh, the president gets to put his men in like these institutions, right? His people are there and that's it. And then maybe 4 years later he loses and the next person comes in and they get to put their people. And it's really been like pulling teeth. A lot of these people that Trump's trying to get rid of, well, are you allowed to do that? And I remember listening to, I was a Vivek fan in the primary, and Vivek talking about shrinking the federal workforce. That was one of his big promises. He was going to shrink it by 75%. And I was shocked to learn that there's all sorts of like legal hurdles to that, like to firing like people in these federal agencies. He was suggesting trying to randomize it, like if your social security number begins with 1, you're out. And then if it ends with an odd number, you're out. Right? Trying to randomize it as much as possible to get away from a lot of these accusations of, well, you're doing this for bias or you're doing this for race or whatever. So I think it's a good ruling because it, for me, it really does sort of drive home the fact that like, no, there are branches, these people aren't above the executive. They operate at the whim of the, chief executive. Now, real quick, explain to me, there's this other case that they decided that came out today. Was it like that they couldn't fire the governor? Can you explain that? Like, how does that differentiate? Because logic would seem to intuit like, well, look, if he's able to fire these people, then this other position, he would be able to fire.
Yeah,
but they rolled in a 5-4. Looks like they kicked the can down the road. Is what it looks like.
I wish they kicked the can down the road. That would have been the correct thing to do. These cases, this one's called Cook. This one's can you fire the heads of the Fed? And the answer there is no. And you might be asking yourself the very basic question, Rob, that if I just said in one case they said the president is the executive, he can fire the heads of agencies that wield executive power because they're in his department. How come they can't fire the head of the Fed? And by the way, the Fed clearly wields executive power. They can debank people, they can investigate, they can fine. These are all executive functions. So how is it that the president can't fire them? And the answer is it's incomprehensible. I'm just going to be as candid as I can. The Cook was decided by the 3 liberal justices who obviously disagreed with Slaughter. So they would have gone the other way on that case. And then Kavanaugh and Roberts, who I think they decided this case on purely practical grounds. They believe that disrupting the Fed could be economically disastrous and destabilizing, and they didn't want to open that can of worms. Legally, and by the way, they might be right. I'm not an economist. Like I'm not going to take a position on that.
Sure.
But legally, I don't think what they did makes any sense. I think that it would have been fine to do what Justice Thomas wanted to do and say, no, that's executive. One rule for all the executive agencies. Let's be legally consistent, guys. That would be a fine approach. Or to do what Gorsuch and Barrett wanted to do and say, we don't have to decide this case today. The Trump team specifically said, we don't want the constitutional issue decided. We're not going to argue it. We're going to let that go. We're not swinging at the ball. Since we don't have to decide it, we aren't going to decide it and kick the can down the road. I think those would both be fine approaches, but the majority decided to swing at the ball and they said, no, it is constitutionally protected. Is that wildly inconsistent with Slaughter? Yes. I don't actually think the two can be reconciled. You can make a little bit, let me try to put on my best majority hat and see if I can do it. I think the argument I would make is the Fed has a unique history and tradition of being insulated from political control, and that history and condition should be taken into account. And therefore, it is insulated in a way that no other similar agency is insulated, and that it has a unique one-of-one rule. I don't buy that because I don't think you can use history to both establish the rule and the exception. It just doesn't make sense. And I don't think the history holds up. This is kind of a deep cut, but the national banks didn't wield executive power historically. They were banks. The modern Fed does wield executive power. So I'm not even sure the historic analogy is a good analogy. So anyway, I do think the two cases are a bit of a mess. On net, it's a huge win for Trump because he can go about dismantling the administrative state, and we should circle back to the long-term ramifications of slaughter, which I think will be very good for the country. But these two cases, reconciling them, I think throw your hands in the air. I don't think it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I know we had that down as one of the losses, but it was interesting to me to see the juxtaposition as a layman because I read through, scanned through these. I obviously didn't read the whole decisions and I scanned through it, and that was immediately what jumped off the page to me. It was like, seems like on one hand, it's like, yeah, sure, Trump has the ability to fire these people, but not here. And I was like, it seems weird. Jefferson, talking of slaughter on your channel, $2, thank you, says slaughter's another anti-fourth branch decision. Yeah.
And this is, as always, Jefferson right on target. This is why, even though Trump lost Cook, and yes, I think they're legally inconsistent, it's still a huge win for those of us who think that we have too much federal regulation. Because here's the thing now. Now it's clear that if you give power to a federal agency, you're giving it to the president. And people all on the left are saying, oh my God, we're giving too much power to the president. Yes, you are. Yes, you are. You're giving too much power to the president, which means you have to roll back the size and scope of these agencies, which is what the people on the right have wanted all along. We believe in unitary executive, but we actually don't want the president to be in charge of all these things. We think these things shouldn't exist, right? But if they do exist, you're giving the power to the president. So make your peace with it. But what you don't get to have is a bunch of bureaucratic, unelected, unaccountable experts who then get to govern us absent the political process on the basis of their expertise. That's not constitutional. So if you want to give the president huge regulatory power over the economy, you can do it, but that's who you're giving the power to. It's whoever holds that chair.
I've said this for a long time. When I talk about bloated government and the problem with it, if you think back to just sort of your basic civics, it's like, well, what branch? Is it the judiciary? I think there's a case to be made that the judiciary has more power than was assumed based on activist judges, right? Is it the legislative? No, I think the legislative is a joke anymore. They hardly do anything, so you point to the executive. But for me, it's not like Joe Biden or Barack Obama or Donald Trump. It's these bureaucrats, right? And I think that's the way it's been a long time. In particular, if you look before Chevron, with Chevron deference, you have these unelected people that largely are at least impacting the way these policies actually play out. And so not only was I a big fan of that case, I think with Slaughter, it seeks to at least give accountability to someone who's elected, right, that has the ability to control these people, because we have no say. We could say, we don't like what Trump's doing, we want a new guy in 4 years. But we can't say that about the Fed chair or all these people in these agencies, which is why the president should be allowed to remove them.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. There's a great follow on X, Casey Maddox, who's kind of he's like a federalist. I guess he's probably a bit libertarian lawyer type, but he makes some great content. And he had a perfect quote about this. Humphrey's executor, for those who don't know, is the case that said that it's this incomprehensible ruling where you could make an agency, but if it's only quasi-executive, then you could limit the president's power to remove the head of the agency, which created the bloat of our federal government and the administrative state. Which those on the right who are keen to this issue, like Vivek, have been opposed forever. So Casey Maddox said, Humphrey's executor is overruled. The president is responsible for the full weight of the executive power. All the agencies, the president's in charge of them. If you think that's a lot of power to give one man, you're right. Now let's get to work making the executive branch much, much smaller.
Yep.
Right. And like that's what these people on the right have been saying forever. Let's get the federal government out of local politics. Let's get the federal government out of your day-to-day life. Let the federal government do trade agreements and military and national stuff. You don't need the federal government in your day-to-day affairs. Let's change that up. Let's finish the job with the DOE. Right? Let's finish the job of getting federal government out of the education business, out of the marriage business, out of all these things that are much better handled by local communities. It's been a disaster. Like, could anybody look at our recent history and go, the federal government being in charge of marriage and abortion worked out great? Like, it's an absolute disaster. So hopefully now the right coalesces around, great, you said we could get rid of them, let's get rid of them.
Yeah, you would hope. You would hope. Now, we already talked about the Cook decision. Some other L's that we have. The E. Jean Carroll case. Trump was hoping that the Supreme Court would look at this case and possibly overturn his conviction, and they've declined to do so. Like, anything on that? What was the rationale? Where's Trump's options go from here?
So Trump's appeals are done at this point. Like, basically, to my knowledge, he's exhausted his appeals. When you appeal to the Supreme Court, that's typically the last place you're going in 99% of cases. And this case is interesting politically, but not legally. Right. Like, the Supreme Court has no particular legal interest in a defamation, sexual assault, civil case. That's just not. They're not overturning state law. The only interest in it is that it's Trump. Right, that would be the only reason to take the case. So it's an L for Trump on that side, in that he's going to have to pay the money. He has the money. He'll be fine. The thing that's important about this case, and the reason I think the Eugene Carroll case is worth talking about, is we've been hearing for months from people who have kind of outed themselves as lunatics that the Supreme Court is so corrupt, so just toadies in Trump's pocket, so viciously under Trump's control, that they are justified in tyrannically packing the court and burning down the Constitution next time they get power, right? Well, here, the Supreme Court had the option to save Trump $5 million and do nothing to upset the legal. Like, it would have been very easy for them to say, like, we take the case, Eugene Carroll, you're wrong, fuck off. We give very few legal reasons. This doesn't change anything. Fuck yourself. Like, if they wanted to do it and they really were corrupt and in his pocket, they could have, but they didn't, because of course they're not corrupt and they're not in his pocket. And they ruled against him on the Cook case. You don't think he wanted to fire the person, Cook, and get more control of the Fed? Of course he did. You didn't think they wanted him to overturn this conviction that's very embarrassing and lets Brian Shapiro run around and talk about, 34 count felons and Eugene Carroll and all this fucking nonsense that people talk about? Of course he did. But they didn't, because they're not corrupt. So, of course, this will go unremarked upon by the Pack the Courts class. I don't think you'll see a single one of them say, oh, you know what? It turns out the evidence is mounting that the court is not in Trump's pocket. Nope. Whenever something pops up where the court does something that disfavors Trump, they just fucking ignore it. And if you ignore all the cases where they rule against Trump and only look at the cases where they rule in Trump's favor and then go, aha, I cracked the code, Rob. It turns out this court is biased. It was like, well, of course they are. Look at how you sorted your evidence.
Yeah, I thought the same thing. Like, there's been some significant, the mail-in voting case, the tariffs case, which we talked about previously. And when, we've brought this up to people we've debated. How do you explain this? Like, if Trump was, when I was debating the guy and it was like, about packing the court. Well, we know the Republicans would. Why didn't they? The court have ruled significant things against Trump's agenda. He has the House. He has the Senate. He could say, okay, fine, end the filibuster, pack the court. He didn't. No one even suggested it. It's nowhere on anyone's radar. And implicit in that is not only have they not tried to pack the court, but implicit is the court's ruled against them. That's the other, arguably the biggest ruling today, maybe with the longest ramifications, the mail-in voting. Now, this is a huge blow. to the Trump administration and a key issue they've had on securing our elections. Basically, it looks to me from an outside perspective, a layman, this is what was ruled upon, that you could accept ballots that are postmarked election day or prior to election day that are received after election day for an indeterminate time. I don't think it announced how long you're allowed to accept and count those ballots, but this is something that Trump's team was arguing against. I remember me and you talking about sort of the statements we heard on this case where, it was like, is it election day or is it election week? Is it election month? I thought this was kind of shocking. I thought this was a case that, the Trump administration had a good chance to win. And it was a 5-4 against with some pretty scathing dissents. What say you? What do you think this case? Is it as bad as people are saying, or is it more nuanced?
I want to model good behavior here because, like, you and I talked about this case. I thought the best interpretation was that election day is election day, but I want to be like, I want to put on my legal analysis hat, not my advocacy hat, right? The law just says the phrase election day, and it's not the Constitution. It's just a law, right? You could change the law. If you're really serious about this, get the Save As Pact, it changes. So this is not the Constitution. This is fixable. But the law just says election day is blank. And then the justices were arguing, does election day mean the day you cast your vote, which would mean that if it was received later, that's still okay? Or does it mean the day you cast your vote and your vote is counted, right? Is election day just the voting, or is it the voting and or at least the receipt by the government, right? So that was the question. And to be honest with you, it could go either way. Like, it's not like the law is clear on this point. Like, I think there's a good argument that election day means when you cast and it's counted. But the argument for it's when you cast isn't terrible. Like, these are both plausible interpretations. I would have preferred that we won this case. That's my preference. But it was a 5-4. It was a close 5-4. And I'm not going to burn down the court over it. All right. It was plausible on both sides. We lost. I'm not going to pack the court to win this issue. What we should do is we should change the law. Go past the Save Act. Pass the Save Act, and the whole thing is solved. So it's a bummer. But I do think it was a close call, and because it was a close call, you see that in the 5-4 split.
It's one of these things that's like, in an ideal world, I don't even have a problem with this. I put my ballot in the day before the election in my mailbox. Heaven forbid there's something happens. My local postman gets sick. They have a difficult time finding someone. By the time my ballot gets there, it's 2 days after. I think most people would say, hey, okay, we can count that. Like, things happen. No big deal, right? The problem is the same thing you see so much with the left. You give an inch, like immigration, it's the same thing. Sure, this person's fleeing some sort of violence, we'll bring him in. Oh, and his 10 million friends behind him as well. You have to take them. It's the same thing here. So when we look at California and we see this crazy shit like what happened with the Spencer Pratt race, where it's like, well, election night, you go to bed and it's like clear cut. And then, well, just wait, we have 4 weeks to go before we'll know. That's insane, right? Now, if every state was ran like Florida, where it's like, bam, they're mailing ballots, they're good to go, it's done, then this would hardly be a big deal. But the problem is the way that it plays out in practice is so laughable that it's like, look, we just have to button this up. That's why this case was important, because it's like, we just have to eliminate any possibility for shenanigans because it's so grotesque the way that it's used in places like California. The fact that the ruling is at least somewhat nuanced, that it says that the ballot themselves have to be postmarked by election day. So my understanding is if I'm like, oh, I'm sorry, I was in the hospital, it's now the day after election day, I get my ballot in the mail, it's postmarked for, Wednesday, after the Tuesday and we vote, that doesn't count. It like, even if it is received before other ballots that are postmarked, right? That's my understanding. So hypothetically, you could say, well, it still solves the core issue, which is that there's like, well, just create more ballots or get more people out there voting if the election's close the way we want. But if you are a person that believes that there is corruption going on, if you're willing to fake a ballot, you're probably willing to fake a postmark date. But at least it's some
Yeah.
added layer of protection.
And it doesn't deal with situations like, I believe in California there's certain situations where you don't have to have the postmark under their law. Like, so like you can kind of
Right.
bypass the postmark. And then it doesn't deal with the issues of ballot harvesting, or some of the convictions we've seen in California where people were paying for votes, or they were letting people use their residence in order to get the registration done, which is illegal. And you've seen some convictions for this recently. So there's a bunch of issues that are left to be solved. But look, at the end of the day, the case was really just about, what does election day mean? Does the phrase election day mean the day you cast your ballot, or the day you cast it and it is received and counted by the government? And as much as I wanted this to come out the other way as a matter of policy, I thought, like, as a matter of policy, it was better. I don't think the law is clear on this. Like, if I opened this law up and you and I read it, I don't think either of us would be like, aha, there's the smoking gun where it makes this totally clear. It's totally undefined. And those are weird cases, because, this is why we have 9 people on the court instead of 1. Because the law isn't clear and the court's doing its best. And, unlike these lunatics that we've been dealing with on the left recently, Justice Barrett and Justice Roberts were the swing votes on this one. I think they got it wrong. I would have preferred they come out the other way. But I don't think they got it wrong in some kind of 90-10. You guys, it's incomprehensible how you
pack the court. Yeah. We need 10 more conservatives. Pack it up, right?
I get where they're coming from. I don't think that it's wild that they came to that conclusion. I think it was like a 60-40 issue, and I would have been on the 60 rather than the 40, but they went the other way.
Yeah. I mean, it's obviously, I think, ramification wise, what you said, the most important thing, this isn't constitutional. This could be affected by law. Right. If the SAVE Act would be passed, if Congress would get off their butt and actually push law to ensure safety in our election, this could be dealt with. And I don't think that my vibe is, given how narrow this decision was, I don't think that would be struck down as unconstitutional.
Oh,
if they were like, election day is election day, that's it. I don't. The ball's in the court of the Republicans, particularly in the Senate, which I have zero confidence in. But hypothetically, there's a fix if legislative branch would actually do something. And, to Trump's credit, he's really putting a lot of political capital on his own side, trying to force the Senate to take up the SAVE Act, which would deal with things like this.
Well, and look, the SAVE Act would deal with it. And even if you couldn't pass the SAVE Act, if you passed a law that just said, in the following statute, when we say election day, we meant your ballots have to be counted by election day. That's what we meant. That would do it. You could actually solve this particular problem in about 5 words. Right? This doesn't have to be a complicated legislative bill. But the SAVE Act does a lot more stuff that's useful. So I'm not saying we should abandon the SAVE Act. But yes, the ball's in Congress's court. And to your point that you bring this up sometimes about messaging, I kind of wish that organizations like TPUSA, for example, or God forbid, the president himself, would get a little bit functional about stuff like this, where it's like, this decision comes out today. There should be people on the ground being like, hey, the court put the ball in our court. We can solve this problem. What are you doing about it, Congress? Today. Let's go out and start rallying the vote and making the thing right now, because it's not like this issue is going to go away. This is going to be one of the 2 or 3 most live issues for the midterms. So, hopefully people are actioning this quickly.
Yeah, I totally agree. So, there's a lot of doom and gloomers out there about this decision. Don't get me wrong, this sucks. It really does. I see, especially we just saw these elections in California. This should be enough to wake up every Republican in the country. Even if it wasn't cheating, let's start under this assumption. What happened with Spencer Pratt and company in California wasn't cheating. That's still not a tenable system in the most advanced country in the world. That's a joke. The way that these elections are done in California, and there's no good reason not to want to shore this up other than you're happy with the results and the way that joke's turning out, the people you want, right? And so I think that this decision, albeit a setback, leaves room for hopefully a political capital being pushed by Trump and hopefully Republican organizations like Turning Point or others putting pressure like, look, get something done. Even if election security has to be piecemeal, even if it's okay, we can't do the SAVE Act. Can we at least do voter ID? Can we at least do election ballots have to be counted by election day? Can we at least do citizen, proof of citizenship? Whatever. Anything's better than nothing at this point. And I think that these issues, if they were explained, would be massively popular. I think even amongst moderate Democrats would be like, yeah, man, we're not too happy with this taking a month to count ballots shit. We would embrace a metric that's like, look, come on, this shit has to be counted, basically on election day. If you want to have mail-in ballots, fine, but they have to be in a timely enough fashion that by election day, that's it. I think most Democrats would be for some form of legislation that would do that.
Or like, let's do it old school, like what we used to do in politics. Write a bill that is so simple that a fifth grader could read it. The bill says something like, you have to vote, your vote has to be in by election day, or you have to have ID of the following types to vote, right? Like something really, really simple, like not complicated, not a big bill, not big, beautiful bill, like something fits on one page. And then call votes on it. Call votes on it like every week and just be like, here are the 6 people who are filibustering this. Here are these are the 3 Republicans and the list of, ex-Democrats who are not in favor of voter ID, which has overwhelming popular support. Please call them if you are their constituents, right? Just actually put some pressure on, because the problem with these big omnibus bills is nobody knows what's in them.
Yep.
So then everyone can kind of like make it up. Like people are like, oh,
totally
you can't pass the SAVE Act because it does X. And you're like, well, does it do that? I don't know. Now I've got to look it up and it's 100 pages long and it becomes complicated. Make it simple and put some pressure on these people. Make them explain the no vote.
Yeah. And I even say that about the Democrats, right? The SAVE Act, the reason I was for a talking filibuster is because it'll expose the Republicans that aren't for the SAVE Act and force the Democrats to get up and argue on the bottom side of an 80-20 issue. Force them. We shut down. Then you could run on like, look, the reason that you're not getting paid at the TSA or these other places is because Democrats have decided that it's more important to protect illegals and to keep a possible fraudulent voting system. They're out there right now talking about it. Philip, go ahead. You're not getting your check. Look what they're saying. This is an 80-20 issue. And so it is incredibly frustrating. I agree with you. The old school way is the way to get back to it. Let's read some super chats on your side. K-Vel again, another 20 says, I'm putting together a collection of all founding documents. I was wondering, once I've read all those, mainly the Federalist and the Anti-Papers, where should I go after that if I want to continue my constitutional studies?
Well,
Ryan?
Let me give you 2 recommendations. One, which is not actually founding, but is if you read the Federalist Papers, a wonderful follow-up would be, there's a book out, I've forgotten the title, but it's called Scalia Speaks. It's a collection of Justice Scalia's speeches that he gave, which is a wonderful follow-up to reading the Federalist Papers, because his ideas trace back to the Federalist Papers and give them a modern spin. So I highly recommend doing that. And then, since you're in my chat, mods can point you in the right direction. My friend Philip Bunn, aka Eucharist, has a tiny YouTube channel, but he is a political science teacher, and at the undergraduate and graduate level, and he's a PhD, and he's been doing working streams where he's compiling his syllabus and pulling together founding documents for the courses that he teaches and kind of working through them on stream. So if you wanted to continue studying this, I highly recommend just going over to his channel and reading the materials that he's reviewing in order to put his syllabus together. If you do that, you're going to end up with an outstanding education in American founding documents. And Philip's the absolute right person to look to for that. So highly recommend his channel.
Jason Mulgren on your side, $5 says, do states other than California do ballot curing to fix errors on ballots?
That's a good question. I don't know.
Yes, I believe Pennsylvania has done ballot curing. I'm pretty sure. So yes, let me check real quick. In fact, it might be more common than you think. In Pennsylvania, there was a big to do about certain counties were doing ballot curing and certain weren't. And surprise, surprise, the ones that were more like Dauphin County,
Mhm.
Philadelphia, things of that nature. But 34 states have a formal ballot curing provision. Uh, 24 explicitly allow it after election day.
This,
So,
this is why this is, by the way, I get so frustrated sometimes when we have these and this is why we make all the jokes about schmewing or whatever the fuck the utterances, because when you get to this point where people are just like trying to atomize very easy to understand concepts, life becomes impossible. You can't
Yep.
have a conversation.
Yep.
Like, ballot curing is not by itself a problem. Like, let's say that like somebody like, it's one of those like old scantrons you had in school where it's like you got to fill in the circle, and they filled in 3/4 of the circle, and it's clear that they picked choice C. It's obvious they picked choice C, but they didn't fill in the last quarter and the machine didn't read it. Ballot curing just means like, oh, a human being realizes the machine didn't scan that ballot, looks at it and goes, oh shit, they obviously picked C, so we'll record this as a C. That's not a problem. The problem is you give people an inch and they take an L.
Yep.
So you have that system, and then they're like, oh, well, they filled it and it was blank. Well, they clearly meant A.
yep.
So it's like, because people pretend that there's no obvious difference between those two things, we end up in a world where it's impossible to have nice things. And that's a bummer. But not all ballot curing is problematic, is I guess what I'm saying.
But yeah, it is something that when you see how it's used in a lot of these left wing areas, you're like, what? But yes, I totally agree with you. And then we have Donald Frank. What's up, my man? $2 says, didn't Florida change because of Bush Gore? What do you mean change?
Is that a hanging Chad?
Yes,
reference?
I think yes, I believe so. If you're referencing sort of one of the things that was brought up during, I'm trying to figure out where you're going with this. When it came to sort of the ballots must be counted on election day thing, part of the argument that was being made during the, what do you call it? Like public statements on the case. What's the technical term for it?
Oral argument?
Oral arguments,
Yeah.
right? There we go. So I don't sound so stupid. They brought up Bush v. Gore, right? And what happened was, I'm pretty sure that's when it happened. You had a bunch of people that were overseas in a conflict that Florida didn't send out the ballots fast enough for these military men. And so there was a special sort of, I don't know if the word's law or rule that was put in place purely for that election that said, we're going to extend the time for these specific individuals because it is through no fault of their own that we delayed sending ballots to like, Afghanistan or some shit like that, which is understandable. But I thought that the state's attorneys did a very good job of pushing like, yeah, but that required a specific action to be taken. It wasn't the norm. But I don't know if that's what you were referencing there. Kevin Faulkner, 1688. Thank you so much on your end. He says, it's nice to hear, and even though the result was different than what you wanted, you still think the conclusion is fair and the Supreme Court got a fair interpretation. Yeah, I mean, it is quite silly for all of the, like, I guess you could distill it down to this. The left accuses you of what they themselves do, right? And they constantly say that, like, well, Trump, he says mean things about certain judges, and he, at the end of the day, let me give you an example that's sort of different. Fetterman did an interview yesterday. My Senator Fetterman, Democrat, right? He does interviews like, look, for all of his big mouth, Trump's basically abided by all the court rulings.
Yeah.
He has, right? Like, he'll bitch, he'll moan, he'll say it needs to change, but he abides. Mamdani's out there like, we're not going to deport Haitians. Nope, we won't allow it. And Fetterman's like, how isn't that a threat to the rule of law and the courts? Like, Mamdani's basically like, we're going to protect these people from the feds. Now, that's a Democrat saying that about another Democrat. Like, look, I don't like Trump's, from Fetterman's perspective, I don't like Trump's big mouth. I think that, yeah, sometimes he's an ass about criticizing the court, but he listens. And in that sort of vein, show me the prominent Republican, even people that may be considered lunatics on the left like me, who's like, we should disband the FBI. Show me once ever suggesting court packing. I can't think of a prominent Republican that suggested it. And so when things go against us, and it's sort of like the Scott Adams, we're watching two movies. I see Republicans over and over. Right now, you go to X and you have people that are like, oh, Amy Coney Barrett's a fucking traitor. They got blackmail on her. She's the fucking worst, blah, blah, blah. That's how bad some conservatives think that her and Roberts have been on the court. And yet, you just are like, well, we got to do better next time, and then pointing something. Not the Democrats. They're like, oh, no. We're getting now decisions that we don't like. We've relied on an activist court for so long. Now that they're overruling some of the core things we wanted, we can't have that. They feel that it's not fair if they're not winning 100% of the time. And so the rules are different. Meanwhile, they'll accuse us of being against separation of powers and rule of law and all this shit. They don't care at all. They just want to, they'll put the veneer of, oh, trust us, it's justified when we do it. And technically it's not against the law for us to remake the court. So, yeah.
Well, I had a Uncivil Law put up a great video on this recently, and I have a reaction to it, which is, I think, also pretty good on my channel if people want to see it. But the thesis here is that the left doesn't want a non-activist court. The left wants in fact, the left wants a maximally powerful court. The left wanted a court that would bless the New Deal, even though the New Deal was unconstitutional when it was proposed. The left wanted a court that, and I agree with this one, with Brown v. Board of Education, that they wanted an activist court. The left wanted with Roe v. Wade an activist court, with Obergefell and gay marriage an activist court. They don't want a court that respects boundaries. They want a court that has broad power to decide the law in every area. The left actually hates separation of powers. Anytime you actually have separation of powers, meaning no judicial review, meaning the court, separation of powers, meaning this is the president's job, it's not the court's job. So the court doesn't have power. That actually offends them. They want a court with maximal powers, but they want a different court with maximal powers. They just don't want this court with maximal powers. And that's what's so transparently, hypocritical and shitty about the whole thing. And look, let's give the most obvious example in the world. Tomorrow, the birthright citizenship case is probably coming out. You know what? I've argued about it passionately. I've given my best arguments about why I think there's a way Trump could win, how he might win big, more likely, how he might win a narrow win in some small areas. But you know what? If I had to put money on it, if I had to bet the money in my wallet about what's happening, I'd bet he loses. Probably he loses. I agree. When that happens, am I going to be calling to pack the court? Fuck no. Because that's just not the way I think about these things. Like, the Constitution is what it is. The court is who they are. It was good for Trump to take a shot at it. I hope he wins. But if he doesn't, and that is the likelihood is that he will lose that case, we'll move on and talk about the next thing. You don't have to turn everything into like a nuclear death pact where we're threatening to blow up the Constitution over getting a case that you don't like. It's wild.
Yeah, I mean, listen, the stakes do not get higher from a subsect of conservatives than abortion. It is murder. Mm-hmm. We had Roe v. Wade since, when was that, 76? It was a reality where conservatives thought that murder was legalized against the most innocent. And yet, by and large, there was respect of the court. There were, of course, any instances of outside violence were not only dealt with, but then we had these ridiculous laws, like, I forget the name of the law.
The FACE Act.
The FACE Act, right? That was just batshit crazy, that went way too far. But you just accepted it. And you were like, for years, we need to win. We need to win an election so we could get some different justices so that we could review abortion. Mm-hmm. I'm barely old enough to remember this. Casey was 92, so I would have been 8 years old, right? But it was, if you go back and look, this was the moment. Finally, in 92, the court's hearing the Casey decision. It's going to relook at Roe v. Wade, basically. Yes, we have our chance. And they basically just were like, nope, stare decisis, precedent matters. And then we ruled it on. This was generational. I mean, from 76 to when was Dobbs finally? Was it like 2019?
Oh God, yeah, I think it was around then. Yeah,
You
I think
know,
it was. I think it was 2019. Let me double
so
check.
you're looking, you're looking at 40 years, damn near, and
Oh no, it was 2022.
oh
God,
shit. Oh yeah. It was during
yeah.
Biden. My mistake. Yeah. So I mean, you're looking at 40 years, and almost 50 years, and you just took it. Republicans could have been like, okay, we won pack the court during Reagan, during Bush, right? Let's do it. Let's try to pack the court to get rid of this. They didn't, and so it is absolute lunacy. It absolutely is. And now, look, I'll admit I'm biased, but I think I have good reason for this, and I think you would agree with me. The Democrats have relied on the court to basically de facto enact the legislation, like gay marriage, or it's just enacted. I read this quote from who was it the other day? One of the justices. It was like, if you're celebrating today because of gay marriage, fine, great, but don't be celebrating the Constitution. This is a loss for the Constitution, right? And I think it was Roberts, and it's like, it's true. That's what it was. You might be out there and you might say, I don't give a shit, gay marriage should be legal, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, but the way in which the court ruled was atrocious. It really was. Pass a law, pass an amendment, but don't. Same with abortion. So it is insane. It is insane how radical the lefts became. They just say, look, we're entitled to the court. We're entitled to like things like abortion. We're entitled to shit like Chevron deference. And fuck you. If we lose those pillars, then we say, fine, then we just remake the court dramatically because we're entitled. That's just the way it is.
First of all, everyone, for people who are interested in like American jurisprudence, should read at minimum Justice Scalia's dissent in Obergefell. It's one of the great pieces of legal writing. And I have a video on my channel, but like it was actually, I think, that dissent, which was like broke me out of my liberal bubble finally and set me down a different political path, because just reading it was so powerful. But and the thing about it that was so incredible is that he started by saying the issue wasn't particularly important to him. Like gay marriage, like it's a policy. It could be a good policy. It could be a bad policy, but good or bad isn't a constitutional issue. It's a policy issue. But what mattered to him was the question of who rules me. Who rules me? Is it the people, or is it 9 unelected justices who then get to set policy coast to coast? And that's what it was. It was an assertion of judicial power, not the Constitution, not the will of the people, because the will of the people never amended the Constitution to talk about marriage, let alone gay marriage. Like you couldn't find the word marriage in the Constitution. It just doesn't exist. So this is a problem. And the originalist and originalism, if I'm getting on my soapbox, is a doctrine of restraint. It's about the judicial branch not overstepping. And what we're seeing is that we finally have a mostly originalist court. We have a few non-originalists, but we have a mostly originalist court. Thank you, by the way, Democrats in Borking for that norm violation, which meant that it took, as you said, Rob, like an extra decade or two because of the Bork thing. But we finally achieved it, and the left is melting down because we're taking their tools away. Like losing Chevron deference dismantled huge portions of the administrative state. Slaughter is going to be the same way. Losing the ability to have insulated bureaucrats is going to dismantle chunks of the administrative state. These are enormous wins from like a small government conservative perspective. Enormous wins, and they were a long time coming. But Trump has had numerous L's. National Guard, L. Tariffs, L. Eugene Carroll, we talked about today, L. Fed, L. Mail-in ballots, L. Abortion pills sent by mail, L. Has he been disregarding these orders? Has he been packing the court? No. So like the thing that they keep talking about, like the big bad Republicans, the evil fascist Republicans, they won't even talk seriously about the level of tyrannical things the left is organizing around.
There is a chance that the decision tomorrow could be like a 7-2 or an 8-1 against Trump.
Oh, yeah.
That is not out of the realm of possibility. How could that, if you just listen to the left, how is that possible? if anything, maybe they eke by with the 5-4, right? But this court that's just in the bag for Trump, and they made him God, Emperor, King, that's above all criticism, and right? And it's just like, I think, so it doesn't add up with reality. And again, what it is people that feel entitled. All the stuff they complain to you about, the violating norms and all that stuff, as we can repeat it to our balloon face, it is exactly what they believe in. We're good, you're bad, so when we do it, it's okay because it's our preference. Mm-hmm. When you do it, it's bad, right? That's it. It's literally that simple. Trump's not doing it, but we know he will, therefore we're justified doing it. We could end the filibuster. We could add states. We could give the legislative power over the judiciary to punish them, right? We could pack the court, all in the name of, because we know that Republicans would do it. Even though they're not, we know they would. So therefore, it's all good. And we're entitled to that. And when they totally remake the landscape, so never forget that it's just a power grab. That's what it is. And it doesn't line up with reality. This court, and by the way, I can't stress it enough, there are people on the right that think that this court is in the bag for the left. So that ought to tell you something, that it's like the idea that it's so cut and dry that it's like, well, this court's so obviously in Trump's pocket. Some of Trump's biggest defenders are like, this court sucks. They're the fucking worst. So,
and look, like you're not going to agree with every justice every time. I've been a big fan of a lot of Justice Barrett's opinion. I think she got some stuff wrong. The mail-in case, I would have come out the other way on that one. It is what it is. Kavanaugh, I've liked some of his opinions. I haven't liked some of his other ones. He came out the other way today on one of the cases. This is how an independent judiciary works. They're not toadies for a political party. And because they're not toadies for a political party, they are occasionally going to do something that irritates you. Yep. But it's not, if your only criteria is whether or not they do something you like, then you're treating them the same way the left does, which is like political pawns on a chessboard. But these are independent justices. They're figuring it out. They're making the decisions the best they can. I'm not saying that you couldn't reach some point where something was so untoward or terrible that you would get really upset about it. But I do think we need to, be the sane group and approach this with a little bit of humility and just be like, okay, shit, we lost. Now what? And by the way, it's that spirit which got Roe v. Wade overturned. They took the L and they said, okay, shit, what are we going to do? Then they took the L on Bork. That was a rough one. Because then they got Kennedy and they got Souter. So now they're fucked for another 15, 20 years after that one, right? Then they took the L from Harry Reid, breaking the filibuster to appoint lower court judges. And then finally, Mitch McConnell got his chance. Like these things come around, but they take a long time.
Yep. Some more super chats. Jefferson, again on your end, $2 says, this election stuff makes me miss hanging chads. Yeah, I mean, that was so weird because for me, that was the 2000 election. So I'm like 16 and it was like a weird thing. It was like, hey man, this is cutting into my nightly cartoons, like the news is running long, with the hanging chads. But in retrospect, pretty extraordinary shit was going on there, but Jason Mulgren, $5 says, what do you think about the permanent apportionment cap in the House? Could more reps mean less polarization? Jason, I think you've talked about this a lot. No, this is the Democrats' dream to just let's go to 7,000 representatives. I don't think it does anything. I think it just helps there be more polarization and more corruption.
Well, if we're going to talk about apportionment, what about the census issues where it's like, what if we just counted citizens?
Yeah.
That would be an interesting way to approach that.
Yep. Yeah. So I don't know. It's interesting. I've thought about it, and I think Jason said it over and over again. Or maybe not Jason. Someone on our channel, I think it's Jason, has brought this up. The idea of what he's talking about is the idea of it's we just need to massively increase the amount of representatives, right? And so then hypothetically, the representatives won't be bought and paid for. You won't see $1 million elections because it's just 7,000 people voting for this guy here. And I think it would be a huge mistake. I think that it won't solve anything. It'll just make things more complicated, and it'll make it more difficult to see like what's going on in the weeds, with possible corruption and shit like that. So for me, I guess I'm willing to have someone walk me through how they think this ends corruption and partisanship. I don't see a path to it.
On my channel, we're big fans of the concept of Chesterton's fence, which is, for those of you who don't know, it's like you find a fence in a field, you don't know what it's there for. Do you tear it down, or do you think to yourself, this fence might be here for a reason, and undertake to figure out why before you do something about it? And I think the conservative impulse is to leave the fence until you're damn sure you don't need it.
That's how I feel. Yeah.
Yeah. Like when there's a radical proposal to like radically change the way we govern, my first impulse is always to be like, well, we have our problems, but we also live in the greatest country that's ever existed. So I'm not sure I want to start like throwing monkeys into the spanners unless I'm really sure that there's a problem that needs solving, and that solving it this way is the right way to go. That doesn't mean you're wrong, Jason, by the way. It just means that I would need convincing.
Yeah. But that specific cap I'm unaware of, I have to admit. Kevin Faulkner on your side at $13.62 says, hypocritical is a nice word for the proper term for tyrannical.
Yep.
Yeah. That's well said. F.A. Vaughn, $5 on my end, said, dudes, I'm so psyched for 250. God bless both of y'all, your families, and God bless America. Thank you. Yeah, I don't know if you knew this, Brian, but my birthday also happens to be on July 4th. So it's going to be a very exciting day. Yeah. How about that? Firecracker, baby.
So the country's celebrating, two things. The birth of Rob Noerrder and, the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence, in whatever order you want to put it.
It is, not to wax too philosophical about it, but it's an incredible achievement what was accomplished by this country in 250 years. And, here's the 250 more great ones. That's what I'm fighting for. Mm-hmm. I'm not trying to black pill. I try to stay motivated. And although it may be true that all empires eventually decline, let my great grandchildren worry about that. And let's continue to have much success. I'm hoping.
And by the way, for those of you who are base natural law enjoyers, this is why the good work of Clarence Thomas and people like this, Justice Gorsuch, who have been highlighting our founding values in our 250th year, is so important. Because you just can't have a free and prosperous people who don't have a common moral sentiment. And right now, we're getting so lost in the sauce. People are watching Instagram and fucking talking about shit that doesn't matter. And this is a great year to take aside somebody you love and teach them about natural law, read them the first 2 paragraphs of the Declaration of Independence, and explain to them why these things matter a great, great deal. Because, I do think that the progressive left is in the business of trying to progress beyond these values because they think they know better. And that's why they feel justified in all their tyrannical impulses. And, it's up to people like us who understand these values and champion them to tell them that they're wrong and to do something about it. So, God bless all of you.
Yep. Let's see. We got Baxter Boy, $5. Thank you. Really appreciate it, man. Jefferson gives another 2, says Destiny called a 9-0 vibes. Only ends matter. Yeah.
Yeah. The thing about this that drives me crazy, right? Like you're talking about, like we talked about Slaughter and Cook earlier, right? And people like Destiny and Peace Corps are going to be like, see how inconsistent this court is? Look at Slaughter and Cook. They articulate a rule and then the other case comes out the opposite way. They're hacks. Well, why? Why did Cook come out the other way? Yes, you could talk about the fact that Barrett and Roberts agreed with the 3 liberal justices. But if the 3 liberal justices had a different opinion, it wouldn't have come out that way, right? Like the inconsistency is because one wing of the court won in terms of voting on one case, and then the other wing of the court won on the other one. The inconsistency is not because the court is inconsistent, but because there's 9 justices with different points of view. That's not it's frustrating, but like it's not a sign that the court is flawed. It's a sign that there are different justices with different opinions, which is how it's supposed to work. It's just kind of a bummer sometimes.
Yep, totally agree. Blaster bot on your end. $5 says, can you provide a definition for the utterance of the day? Amy Coney Barrett can't. What even is a day? How long is it? It could be any duration, really, even weeks. Yeah. Yes, I know. There's a lot of ACB hate today. I know that. I know. I've seen it. So,
but be careful with that blaster bot, because by that token, what even is a dinosaur?
That's right.
That's right. What even is the left card versus the right card? How could we even tell whether one card always wins based on left v right? What is left v right? These are
what is defrauding your viewers? What is that? What does that even mean? Like, those are just sounds. I don't know what you're talking about. And then we got James for $2 says, I, not Jason. I'm the king of the 1 per 30,000. We go. The J names. Listen, let me say this to both Jason and James. I'm not saying it'd be the end of the world if it happened. I don't know what effective change. We'd spend a lot more money with a lot more people that were like, now getting government salaries and, wanting pork projects for their own little district, I guess. I don't know. But
look, since James and Jason are now creating...
Jason comes back to 5 and says, don't put that voodoo on me. First time I've ever had. I'm so sorry, Jason. I hope you see I didn't just pull that out of my ass. Like, that was an actual thing that's been
first of all, did we just discover a new grift? You ascribe one chatter's content to another chatter and then they pay you to correct it?
Yeah.
Oh shit.
Oh, you know what? You know who it was that said it?
That was Blasterbot.
It was Blasterbot and that bastard Wade Boggs and Rasa Illusion. Yeah, it's them.
Fuck those guys.
I guess they'll have to send in super chats to correct the record.
Yeah. Well, look, James and Jason, since you are on Team J and on Team Galactic Senate, I hereby empower you to give us a committee report on the need for the Galactic Senate. We'll take it under advisement.
Yeah. And then, now listen, I think you're kicking my ass in super chats tonight, but look at this. My man Lavin comes in.
Holy crap.
$200. Absolute psycho legend that he is. Says, we hold these truths to be self-evident. All men are created equal. They are endowed by their creator with certain unalienable rights. Among these are life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness, to ensure the right whip songs. And thank you. In my channel, if you donate $200, you can end the whip songs for the night. Ha! That's good news for me. I don't have to hear that stupid shit. Lavin, you are the absolute man.
That might be the best dono in the history of YouTube, both in terms of like quality, declaration sites, freeing
Fits in
Rob
with the 250,
from the whip
yes.
$200.
Freedom. Like King George was like, play whip songs, and Lavin's like, no. So before you go, right? Let's get a prediction. Let's get it out there. What's your prediction tomorrow for the birthright citizenship case? Like, how are they going to rule? Do you have a feeling on it if it'll be nuanced or and what do you think the actual count will be?
It is very likely that Trump loses 7-2. I think that is the likelihood. If he wins, it'll be a slim majority. And it's likely going to be not on legality versus illegality, but on the narrow issue of whether you're here temporarily. Because I do think there's good historic evidence that if you were here temporarily, the people who wrote the 14th Amendment did not mean to include you. That you have to be here permanently. He could win on that, and I could see that being like a 5-4 or 6-3. But that is my optimist hat. I think the odds of him getting like a global win are vanishingly slim. So let's call it 70% he loses, 30% he gets a narrow win on temporary. But by the way, winning on temporary, I call it a narrow win. That would be fucking
huge. Yep.
That'd be fucking very huge. Because like when you think about the worst situations, most of them are temporary.
Look at this. On your end, the man Kevin Faulkner gives $223. What a legend!
Shit.
It says the tree of liberty must be refreshed from time to time with the blood of patriots and tyrants. Oh snap!
Holy fuck! See, this is what I get for saying the best dono of all time. Kevin Faulkner is just like, all right, hold my beer. And in fact, Ryan, why don't you go buy a bunch of beers? Happy 4th of July to you, Kevin Faulkner. What a goddamn legend.
What? Absolutely. Crushing it. Thank you so much, Kevin.
Yeah.
That is absolutely amazing.
He splashed the pot last night on my stream too. So, Kevin is buying his way into the Hall of Fame right now. Unbelievable.
Look at that. Yeah. Yeah, and that's what it takes too. Money buys affection. Absolutely, we like you more than everyone else. You've donated more. So that's the way it works.
Look, this is how capitalism works, like it is what it is. Like you ever watch any like gaming streams?
I dabbled,
Yeah. What one of my favorite grifts I've ever seen on YouTube. It was so fucking funny. There's a streamer called Day9, and he does Magic the Gathering, so he was reviewing all the new cards. And he's giving his honest opinion. But the way it works is if you hit the dono threshold, you can bribe him to change his mind. So he'll be like, this card is the worst. No one's going to play it. Dono comes in $50. Like, this card is the best.
Actually,
it's unbelievable.
Yeah.
It's absolute just bribe for content, just clippable memes on demand. Wonderful idea.
Well, listen, I know someone's going to donate at least $224 on my side here to win. But listen, I haven't given my prediction. I also am going with the 7-2. I think that Trump's going to lose on a 7-2, and it'll be a setback, and it sucks. And I think it highlights the point that we need a working legislative, that this issue of immigration, it's not going away. And particular, some of the most egregious forms of birthright citizens or birth tourism that we see, like there's reports of like companies in China that literally have boats where thousands of Chinese citizens are getting on boats to come to the United States just to have a child, taking that child back to China, and 18 years later, that child could vote in U.S. elections. That's crazy. And so it's not worth losing your head over if this decision goes the wrong way. I think it's likely to. I'm predicting that as well. But it just highlights the importance of winning these elections and focusing on the midterms and doing our best to win now and get more active when it comes to primaries moving forward, to get people on these issues that we think, or issues like we're talking with the SAVE Act and, sort of election day being election day. That happens in the primary. You have to really be pushing for people in the primary. So that is my prediction as well. I'm predicting a 7-2 that they roll against court. I think, and I'll even give you a little further. I think, would you agree with me at this? If Trump wins, even if it's a narrow win, it's like a huge deal. Like, the left would be infuriated. You agree with that?
Yeah, if Trump gets even a narrow win, the court packing calls and the level of discontent and just psychosis is going to be extraordinary. For some reason, and I don't know why, this case animates people on the left in a way that almost no other case does. And some of it's just fear mongering. They think that he's going to like denaturalize people, or that it's retroactive, which it's not, and a whole bunch of things that are just misinformation, basically. But I don't know what it is, but there's something about this case that makes people extraordinarily passionate. And by the way, they wouldn't be wrong that it's a big deal. It would be a big deal. Like if you could say, yes, if you sign up for one of these boats that lands in Guam or another U.S. territory, and then you give birth in an apartment and go back to China, that kid's not American. That's huge. That's huge. Just by itself, that's huge.
Now, I swear I didn't read this, but this is why I got you to say that. Because I was going to say, then they would have leaked the decision if Trump won. If it's that big of a deal, it would have leaked. We'd already be seeing the telltale signs. We would see Democrat senators already like up in arms. So they're going to win. And then James comes right in with the 5. I just read this as if Trump was going to win birthright, the opinion probably would have been leaked already. I totally agree with it. And I think that's a shame, by the way. I have that little confidence in big decisions anymore because no one was ever held accountable for the Dobbs leak, and why stop now? By the way, like if I could get on my high horse for a minute, there's been a lot of people that have, Mark Halperin being one of them. I like Mark Halperin over at Two-Way. I think he's great. And he came out and was like, everybody needs to condemn what happened to Pete Buttigieg. I don't know if you saw this, but allegedly there was a fraudulent CPS report. If that's true, that's heinous.
Yeah.
Look, I've no love for Pete Buttigieg.
Did he get swatted or what happened?
False Child Protective Service report, and they took the child away from him for 24 hours and are now saying it was false. Now, maybe there's more to the details, but let's accept for the sake of argument that the story is as told. That's heinous. People weaponizing there's all sorts of things. There's swatting, there's doxing, there's litigiousness. Weaponizing CPS is one of the most disgusting things possible, and it happens. So that's terrible. However, the reason I bring it up on this show is this. Where was Mark Halperin when Amy Coney Barrett got swatted the other day? What was that, 2 weeks ago?
Mm-hmm.
That she got swatted? I'm sorry, I didn't hear the mass calls against that. All the calls of when Trump calls out Boasberg by name, oh my gosh, it puts him in the crosshairs. Well, we've had assassination attempts against Kavanaugh. We have Amy Coney Barrett getting swatted. I'm sorry, where's all the left? I don't hear it. I don't hear the resounding chorus for, my gosh, we're getting too extreme when it comes to going against these justices. So, I just thought I would bring that up to get my own little moral high horse there for a minute, because, it's easy to say, of course, when something bad happens to someone on the left that's beyond the pale, we should all say, hey, that's not good. But it seems that there's scant people on the left that want to speak up when it's happening to people that they're ideologically opposed to.
It does seem like a double standard, and it certainly seems like there's it's not just that. Like it comes out in areas like this where you're talking about, like what people are outraged about in the selective outrage machine. But also, I feel like on the left these days, nothing is just politics. Like, let's go back to the mail-in ballot case. I had a preference, but it's a preference. Like, I would have preferred the court came out the other way. I think it would be better. It would be better. But I don't think it's like a constitutional crisis. I don't think that the country is going to implode because it came out the wrong way. I think that we have to pass a law to fix it, right? But I often see on the left that when something like if Trump wins birthright citizenship, it's going to be a moral crisis. It's going to be some sort of catastrophe that can never be recovered from. It can't be the case that somebody else was right about the Constitution and they were wrong. There's no room in their worldview for any other.
Well, they're already doing
opinion.
it with the TPS. Oh my goodness, this is the narrative already starts. These poor Haitians, they have mortgages. They have roots here now. But you knew it was temporary the whole time. Why didn't you come out and say, by the way, this isn't temporary. We intend to keep these people. It's always later. Dudes like me will be like, wait a minute, I think you're bringing these people in and you're going to want them to remain and you're going to want to give them, how dare you? That's a racist conspiracy theory. And then when it's like, okay, it's time to go home now, the temporary, you can't do that. We always intended to keep them here. Right. It's always a moral outrage. You're absolutely right. Particularly when it comes to anything, when it comes to immigration. Mm-hmm. Everyone must be allowed to, not to wax on, this is more politics than legal, but J.D. Vance is on Bill Maher this week. And Maher's like, hey, the left's crazy. I get it. There's crazy. But couldn't you have been a little easier when it came to deportations? And Vance gave a very diplomatic answer. But the real answer is no, man, fuck you. Because we can't do anything. Anything will be seen as over the line. You guys, your side will show up willing to enact violence. And then we'll be like, no, man, we have to deport them. It's like saying, can't we enact DUI laws without, separating families? No! That's sort of the point. You broke the law, you pay the price. And you can't be like, yeah, but these category of criminal that broke the law, we just selectively feel that they shouldn't have to abide by the rules. Bullshit. That's the game, right? Where were these people when pro-lifers under the FACE Act were getting thrown? I don't recall them being like, whoa, this is too harsh. You're showing up with ARs and, 20 people deep when they pulled Roger Stone out of his house in his underwear. I don't recall hearing, whoa, this is too much the way you're doing this. So I'm sorry, this faux we need this compassion. And that's the real problem. The truth is any of these rules or any enforcement of rules are going to be painted in the worst possible light as a humanitarian crisis. And no amount of enforcement will be acceptable to these people.
Yeah,
and that's what it is.
And J.D. Vance was diplomatic, but what I liked about his answer is that he did say the essential bit, which is if no amount of friction is acceptable, then you're basically saying that if you guys organize some militant Antifa-style protest, that we don't get to enforce the law.
Yep, that's it. That's what they're.
That can't.
By the way, which is what they want. That's exactly what they want. If we raise a stink, then you can't do it. Okay.
And we went through the indictments. It's not like these are, grassroots spontaneous protests of innocent college kids. Like these are militant organized cells showing up. So they're always going to show up, right? Like, it isn't some spontaneous, lovely, peaceful protest. It is quite the opposite of that. They're literally stalking federal agents in order to disrupt their activities. So at a certain point, you got to say, like, are we going to say that those people get to decide national policy? Like the stalkers, the guys writing down officers' license plates, those are the guys who get to decide national policy? That doesn't seem like a good way to govern a country.
Well, and then to what I say to the left, right, is if you play by those rules, the other side will say, fine, we'll play too, right? And eventually they'll say, oh, that's the rules? As long as we raise a violent stink about something, then we get our way? Okay, we can do that too. And then, of course, you know what happens. Well, if the right decides, you know what, we're just going to riot like 70 days in a row in a right-wing city. Like, you know what the response will be. This is terrorism, bring down the boot, throw these people in prison forever. Oh my goodness, every Republican has to answer for this. Hearings on Capitol Hill with television producers, movies being made, starring Denzel Washington. You know what I mean? It's like, it's so fucking ridiculous. I was out of breath in 2020 making the point over and over. If you guys celebrate this or ignore what's going on with these riots with BLM, inevitably, the right will play that game. They'll say, fine, we get to have our political riot. And when they do, you people will lose your fucking mind. And that's exactly what happened. And it's like, I don't know how, like, it is clear that the left doesn't give a shit because they're so used to the standards never being enforced upon them. They could come on shows like mine or yours and say, yes, we should have political assassinations. Yes, we should be allowed to. Weren't the founding fathers against tyranny? Oh, well then, ICE isn't allowed to arrest people, right? So we're allowed to, this stupid shit. Yes, we should break the law. You should lie to ICE. You have these people saying this shit publicly. If you would breathe something like this on the right, my goodness, the Biden administration would have the FBI knocking at your door immediately. It's fucking ridiculous and asinine. People like us are trying to be there to be like, this isn't acceptable on either side. But the more you allow it to happen over and over and over and over again, eventually the other side's going to say, fuck you then. If that's the game, then that's the game. And you don't want to see it come to that.
Yeah,
you want to see it end before it gets there.
I need a pithy phrase for this, so maybe we can think about how to brand it, because it's a tough concept to understand. And it needs to be quick and punchy. But there's a thing that I've noticed that the left does where they diffuse accountability, and because it's diffused, they think there should be no accountability.
Yeah.
Like, for example, they'll say, okay, well, like, can you prove that Obama or specifically was influenced in any specific way by any of the people who made him a multimillionaire the moment he left office? Can you? And it's like, no, I can't do that. Like, he got the money afterwards. He knew he was going to get the money. I'm sure it influenced him in any number of ways, but it's hard to connect those dots. They're like, aha, well, then there's no accountability for that. That's totally fine. But Trump, well, his family is taking the meme coin. So it's more direct, and therefore there's accountability for that one, but not for the donor class giving you money after you leave office and you're guaranteed to get that money and you know it's coming. Don't fuck with your donors. Okay, that's weird. Oh, well, Trump is directing his DOJ to do things. It's like, well, you really think that Biden and Obama, Eric Holder said, I'm his wingman? You don't think he ever talked to his AG and was like, hey, you got to look into this? You don't think that they did that behind closed doors? Like, well, can you prove it? It's like, okay, I don't know. There's executive privilege. I don't have those documents. Then we're never going to have those documents. But you really think that they didn't have those conversations? Like, why wouldn't they have had? They did it behind closed doors. But as long as there's plausible deniability on their side, they're willing to say that there's nothing wrong with it whatsoever. And as long as they diffuse responsibility, there's nothing wrong with it whatsoever. And it's a good party trick, but they're using it too much. And I feel like if we could find some punchy way to point it out to people so they just see it, people will go, shh, it would break a lot of glass.
What I try to do is, like, when I've debated this tactic, what I try to do is like, fine, then someone should have been held accountable. For example, go back to the Hillary email scandal, right? Someone in Hillary's team got a subpoena to hand over 35,000 emails. And then after they got that subpoena, it was like, let's delete the evidence. Now, I think that there is strong circumstantial evidence that that order came from people at the top of Hillary's campaign. For example, the name escapes me now, but one of her top lawyers, not Huma, but the other one, had a meeting with the guy that deleted that shit 2 days before he did. When that guy was asked by the FBI after he was given immunity, what did you talk about in that meeting? He said, I don't remember. A joke. It's a fucking joke. And if it would have been Trump's team, they would have threw the book at this fucking guy. He would have been looking at 40 years in prison, and he would have turned on whoever told him to do this, right? But my point is this. They always say this. Do you have proof that Hillary ordered it? Well, no, I don't. Therefore nothing to see here. No. There's still a crime. There absolutely is still. That shit happened, and no one was held accountable. And like you said, they diffuse it. But it was some nameless person and some. So why even bother? Why even talk about it? Or you see this constantly. And I actually think that there's a point to this. I think that culturally, that we have accepted on the left that you are morally superior. And so no one needs to give you marching orders. They all know the score. Lois Lerner didn't need to be told by Barack Obama, go after 501c3s that are Republicans. She didn't need to. She knew what the mission was. We're the good guys. They're the bad guys. Fuck them. Simple, right? And I think it's like this all over, right? Obama could say, Mr. President, here you go. Here's our final report before you leave office on Russia interfering in the 2016 election. It doesn't really say anything about them wanting Trump to win. I'm recommending that we have a new report. Let's start releasing it tomorrow. And they're like, read you loud and clear.
Got it. Yeah.
Got it. Right? And then within 24 hours, they're leaking to the New York Times. Oh, the new ICA says that Russia did it to help Trump. Right? There was never Obama had to say, no, what I want is this. You need to. And so, like, what happens is we have all of these things where it's like, well, yeah, shit happened, but it's a long time ago. We called you a conspiracy theorist in real time when you were telling us it was fucked up. And you can't draw a direct line to any one individual. Say, fuck it, forget it. But all that shit that Trump did, here's an easy example, right? When they were going after Trump with Jack Smith, right? There were articles written in the mainstream media that was like, Biden's frustrated that they're not going after Trump fast enough, right? And so when I would when I would say, look, the Biden team's prosecuting Trump, blah, 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 people are like, prove it. It's okay as long as Biden himself didn't order it. I was like, for goodness sakes, the mainstream media is saying Biden's infuriated. You don't think that Jack Smith or Merrick Garland sees what's being reported? They don't know that Biden's pissed off, that he wants Trump to be brought down? And they're like, no, there's plausible deniability, so therefore there's nothing wrong here. And the other argument I make to this is like, but Biden's a human fucking vegetable. He wasn't running the show anyways, as we all know. So it turns out the people that stood to lose power, i.e. the administration propping up Biden, were the ones going after Trump, right? If Biden was a figurehead, well, who's the real power? The real power is the people that are crafting the laws, etc., who also are the ones that are going after Trump. They make it seem like, well, unless Biden himself said, go after Trump, no problem. There's no problem with that. And it's just, I'm tired of the double standard when it comes to this bullshit. But yeah, I see what you mean.
Think about Tim Walz in Minnesota with ICE, right? Where it's like, do I think we're ever going to find a document that links Tim Walz directly to Antifa at the Whipple Center? No, I don't think we ever will. I think it would be incredibly foolish for such a document to exist on his side. And I don't think he's that foolish, but what you can see
could be him. He could
possible,
be, but yes.
It's possible. But what you can say is you can go like, oh well, let's zoom out and just say, what do we know? Despite denials, Antifa is more than an idea. There are people who unify under this banner. They also unify under specific cells, which are in fact militant, and we have evidence of this. They network with each other and they create insurgency where they are militantly resisting federal law enforcement. At the same time, the Democrats in power in these areas were systematically denying local law enforcement support for the federal law enforcement officers in this area while litigating in federal court to deny the use of the National Guard to protect the federal law enforcement officers from said militants because there is no local law enforcement support. Meanwhile, the sanctuary cities are denying access to the low-hanging fruit that are in jails already for other offenses, which would get the deportation numbers up without the need for raids. So what you have is layers upon layers upon layers of resistance, maximizing friction, attempting to create the very powder keg that then led to Renee Good and Alex Preddy in situations like this. And then at the end of the day, you go like, well, it really does seem like there's a lot of coordinated Democrat and lefty action that led to all these bad outcomes. They're like, well, can you prove that Walz? Where's the Walz memo? Right? But if you zoom out for half a second, you're like, holy shit, there's a lot of stuff happening here that all seems pretty highly coordinated. And yes, to your point, Rob, everyone fucking knows. Everyone knows what's happening. Like if you don't send law enforcement out to support ICE, you know what's going to happen. You know what's going to happen. But yeah, it's diffused and it's a very good optics tactic. And I think we on the right need to get better at connecting these dots and finding like a pithy way to frame it that doesn't sound like a conspiracy, that makes it seem like the common sense thing it is. And that's why I think this Antifa stuff is such a big deal, because it puts it out there in the open for people to see.
The last thing I'll say on this is it's like, never forget this. The left gets infuriated for things Trump says but don't do. Like lock Hillary up. Had every chance to do it, didn't do it. But they support the left doing the thing as long as they don't say it. Lock Trump up, but we didn't say it. We didn't say lock Trump up. We just did it. Right? And they're like, oh, that's perfectly fine. Which goes along with the theme another theme that you'll see with the left, which are against them, words are violence. But against you, violence is words, right? So when they're out there rioting, they're like, that's free speech, baby. But if you're like, hey, we don't buy your pronouns, they're like, that's violence. You can't do that. That's violence against us. So it really fits the theme. We have a couple more super chats. K-Val, $5 on your end, says, the way things are going now, we could have a Chinese president that spent less than a couple years living in the U.S. Well, no, because they would still have to change the Constitution that says, but that could happen, I guess.
Funny you bring that up. Hold on. You can go to the next one, but I'm going to circle back to this because funny that someone brought that up.
The left builds the haystack over the needle, says Jefferson for $2. I see what they're saying. They're saying with the birthright citizenship shit. Yeah. Yeah.
Jefferson's a poet, man. He's got a way of putting this stuff together.
That's right. And then Jefferson on my end, $2 says, or the mafia boss can order a hint with a wink. That's exactly right. And then James, finally, on your end, $2 says clandestine corruption. Yeah.
So friend of the stream, Josiah, to your point about changing the Constitution. If you want to share screen for a second.
Yeah.
Friend of the screen, I mentioned he's not content with merely packing the Senate and packing the court. Here, Josiah advocates for letting foreigners become president. Believe them when they tell you here they are. And apropos to your point, Mandami weighs in on changing the Constitution so he can run for president. Josiah, A, he laughs and says, no, we shouldn't change the requirement. B, we should change the requirement. So adding to the pantheon of policy that Josiah supports, he supports breaking the filibuster, packing the Senate by adding states to give the Democrats a long-term advantage, packing the court to change the Constitution so that Democrats can get all their policy preferences in place despite them being unconstitutional, and changing the Constitution so that foreigners can in fact become president. Hey, but good news for Josiah. If you pack the court, they might, the pack of 16 liberal justices might read the foreigners clause as outdated racism and say Mandami can become president. So good news. Josiah has completed his trifecta of tyrannical nonsense.
Well, and this is what we talked about. There is no Constitution. There is no separation of powers if you're allowed to just pack the court. You could be like, we don't think you should have a Second Amendment. Any gun. We don't think you should be allowed to have any gun. Period. Not one. Not even a simple, breech loader. You can't have that. You can't have a muzzle loader, right? Nope. No handgun, no shotgun, no AR, nothing, right? And you'd be like, that's ridiculous. That's blatantly against the Second Amendment. Says who? Not the 40 justices that they put in next week. They disagree with you. Now fuck off. What are you going to do about it? Nothing. You're just like, oh, well, then I guess we'll win another election. No, they say you can't run. Your name's not allowed to be on the ballot. Now what, motherfucker? And I mean, it's literally that ridiculous. That's what they're suggesting. And what are they going to say? No, we wouldn't do that. Motherfucker, are you suggesting packing the court, adding states, ending the filibuster, allowing foreigners to be president? All this shit in one election you're supporting.
Like, why would we assume that you're suddenly going to have scruples about it later, right? Like, and let's put the shoe on the other foot for a second. Like, let's say I wanted to do something that I would call overtly tyrannical. And by the way, I do not support this. I'm making it as an example because I think it's a funny one. I think it should be illegal to vote for Democrats. I think if you vote for Democrats, you should go to jail. Now, you might say that clearly violates the First Amendment. That is a clear violation of the Constitution. And I would agree with you. But you know who might not agree with you? Justice Andrew Wilson.
Right.
I feel like Justice Andrew Wilson might have a strong view about that. And if he doesn't, Justice Mike Lindell, Justice Giuliani, Justice Alex Jones, I feel like there's a bunch of justices who might have a strong view on this issue. And before you say that's fucking crazy, there's nothing in the Constitution that says you have to be a lawyer to be a Supreme Court justice. There's nothing in the Constitution that says you need a law degree, or even, in fact, there's been people who don't have law degrees on the Supreme Court before. So when you get to this level of constitutional meddling, you quickly run out of room. Like you could do fucking anything if you're manipulating the court in this way. And if the examples that Rob and I just gave sound crazy, it's because they're fucking crazy. These are crazy things to suggest. It's crazy to suggest these things. And the fact that they're gaining traction now, and you're hearing like Gavin Newsom talked about like, oh, you might have swayed me on court packing in an interview over the weekend. Like, these are not fringe political figures. Like, and I know we like to make fun of Destiny and Josiah and Pisco and Dev, but these are like internet figures. But we're talking about Elizabeth Warren, Ro Khanna, Gavin Newsom, Kamala Harris. These are not minor figures in the Democratic Party. These are national power players, and they're saying this shit. You take it seriously. And fucking, by the way, EPUSA, take this shit seriously. Like, yes. let's go on the fucking warpath. Let's do some shit.
And listen, the Democrats right now, like this, again, maybe outside the scope of like just a legal analysis, but here's the deal. In my opinion, the Democrats right now, the moderate ones, right? The ones that maybe want to protect from like these DSA members being elected. I think the signal they're getting is this. If you want to prevent those people from getting elected, the people that are the base of those people, you got to start throwing them some shit, which means more extreme policies. And one of those could be, we'll pack the court. You don't think that all the DSA members are like, yay, yes, that's exactly the type of things we would do. Us socialists, us communists, yes. So you're going to see formally, I think you'll see this. I think you're going to see in 2028 a candidate that's going to know that for the general it's bad news to say pack the court, but is clearly going to flirt with that in the primary. That's clearly going to, because the base is becoming more radical, right? And so this is not just, oh, AOC said something, Bernie said something, and that's it, the rest of the Democrats. This is, Elizabeth Warren ain't that. Ro Khanna ain't that. James Carville ain't that. These are mainstream, like, steady Democrat figures, and they're out there saying this shit. And I'm telling you, it's coming. And like Carville's side, don't run on it, just do it. That's how it'll happen. And it'll come, trust me, it'll come with some crisis, right? There'll be something, those evil, dastardly Trump court that's still there, they won't allow these poor widows into the country. Their children are here, damn it. How could we? We must add people to the court to allow just these women. And then you'll see what happens from there. So they're once you give them the power, they're not going to stop.
And the funniest thing about it is you're saying there's going to be an emergency, because there clearly will be an emergency. And this is like apropos of nothing, but it just got me thinking. When was the last time you heard anybody talk about the climate?
Al Gore's still mumbling. Yeah, but I know, it's funny, right?
Like, I remember when we were supposed to have all died in a fiery inferno by now. And if not that, we were supposed to have essentially given up national sovereignty to global elites in order to prevent the fireball. Like, no one talks about it anymore.
Well, once Bill Gates decided that he needs a bunch of energy for his AI data centers, all of a sudden, no, never mind. Climate change not that big of a deal.
Isn't it funny? But like it shifted on the drop of the dime, and that's what I mean. Like I feel like we don't know what the next emergency is going to be, because I do think the narrative could shift just like that. Like I think they might be like, yeah, this trans thing, okay, we're done. What's the next one? Like who knows? Like there'll be a next thing. I just don't know what it's going to be.
Yeah, it's crazy. So, all right, well, what do you have going on for the rest of the week?
So, well, we got a bunch of stuff coming up. So, one of the things we didn't cover tonight, but we should talk about, and we're going to be talking about more in the future, is that after the 4th of July holiday, we're going to get the Charlie Kirk preliminary hearing. Now, this is a big deal because the lunatics out there, like the Baron Colemans and the Candace Owens, they've spent a lot of time speculating about what the evidence will be. But at this hearing, which could take days and hopefully will be televised, the prosecution's going to have to actually present some of their evidence. Not all, but some. This is going to be one of the first times that people are going to get to look under the hood a little bit. And hopefully, by the way, I hope it seems to me like this kid did it. So assuming that's true, I hope the prosecution nails him. But if he didn't do it and there's no evidence, then we'll see what happens, and then he should get off. But we'll see what's actually happening, because up till now it's just been people spinning their wheels on social media. This is a big deal coming up. I'm also hopefully setting up a debate with Lonerbox on court packing on Modern Day Debate. That'll be, I think, the 17th. We're working on the date.
Nice.
Which will be good. And then this week, I'm going to be throwing down on Gibbs's stream, assuming we can find some hapless lefties who want to get demolished.
On court packing?
I don't know at the time. I think this is just going to be a general throwdown. I think this week on Gibbs's stream is just going to be the left is lawless and tyrannical. So it's just going to be just a general shit show debate, but that'll be fun.
Maybe my cousin Arlo Kalebeard will show up. I used to do a left-wing character, Arlo Kalebeard. Maybe he'll show up to debate. No, that sounds great.
What's going on with you, bro?
I don't know. So I just got back with the Turning Point thing and on vacation. My birthday's Saturday. I plan on just doing a series of regular streams. I think I have a no prep debate on Thursday, and I'll be doing the extravaganza, I think, every day this week. That's nice. At 5:30 on the Crucible's Rumble channel exclusively. So that's my plan. I'll finish up here tonight for a little bit, but you know what I'm going to do tonight? Sleep. Yeah, I drove all day yesterday, and for whatever reason, I didn't. That first day back in your own bed, I don't know what it is. I always have trouble adjusting. Like I keep waking up. The second night, though, it's going to be wonderful. I'm going to sleep in.
It's going to be fucking glorious. It's going to be fucking glorious. Yeah,
I don't have a real job like you, so I just
you earned it. Get some sleep, man.
Thank you.
You fucking earned it. By the way, when you see Speakeasy, when I debated him on the Horseradish's show, we were talking with Horseradish of trying to set up a 3, because we just 3-on-3 debates. Ooh. And I was saying, you, me, Speakeasy versus some hapless 3-man lefty team that's going to get fucking dumpstered. That would be fucking fun. So nudge him for me when you see him, because I haven't heard back from him.
I will. That sounds amazing. I would love to do that. So.
Dude, now the problem is we'd have to find someone dumb enough to take those odds.
Well,
like I will say candidly, I'm not going to name names, but there have been more than once when I've been like, oh yeah, you want to do a 2-and-2? It'd be me and Rob, and people are like, no, I don't want to do that.
Yeah, it's very. I have that. I know it starts to get difficult when you do a lot of these debates. Speakeasy does the no prep thing. I don't know who the opponent is, and he's having trouble finding opponents for me. But hey, here's my thing though. I don't want to be with people that are just ridiculous time wasters. 11 hours. Other than that, like I'm pretty much open to debate anyone. And yeah. I see some people in our chat. Maybe they'd be open to doing those sorts of debates.
You might have thought it was 11 hours, but could I tell you it was only 11 schlowers?
It was actually like 10 hours and 43 minutes. So I am overselling it. So I remember one time I was doing a 24-hour stream, and unbeknownst to me, YouTube's got like an issue if you go over 8 hours. I don't know if you've ever experienced this.
No, I've never come even fucking close.
Yeah, so like I ended up streaming 25 hours because when I did it, it was the night that the clocks rolled back. So I did a 25-hour stream, and I had like 6 or 7 lefties. The message must have went out like, Rob said he's going to do 24 hours, but it's only 7 hours. It's like, yeah, you dumb shit. Look at the next video. It also is 7, then another 7, and then another like 6. You idiot. But it's so funny the shit people will give you for anything,
Yeah.
By the way, you won the Super Chat War. We're going to start making this a grift. Ryan wins tonight, the Super Chat War. But we're coming back for a vengeance 2 weeks from now. I'm going to stack the deck. I'm going to make sure that there are people to stack the deck to make sure I win 2 weeks.
See, the problem is I don't have like a monetization strategy that's as clever as yours. So like I want the competition. I'm into it. Let's do the competition and I'll gracefully win today. But I see how this is going to go in the future, Rob, because you're going to be like, that motherfucker Ryan's coming on. Here's the deal. Double whip songs.
No.
You're going to blow me out of the water.
No, it only counts for... No. I would rather lose everything than have to play double whips. I've had it with that shit. So, well, Ryan, it's always a pleasure. Hopefully we'll talk soon. And everyone, I'll put the link to your channel. I hope everyone goes over and follows.
Guys, there is so much stuff going on in terms of like the law, politics nexus right now. Rob and I tried to cover this stuff for you as best we could in the time that allowed. Any one of these topics could have taken up the entire stream. We did 3 hours, and we could have done 3 hours on any of these easily. So, if you want to see more of this stuff, let us know what interests you. Swing by my channel. I've got analysis on Antifa. The Supreme Court stuff's going to be coming up soon. And follow Rob. Cross the streams. Follow each other. Rob, always a pleasure. See you soon, buddy.
Take it easy, man. We'll see you. All right, I gotta do this. Remove. Give me a second. Save changes. Remove this one. Save changes. Switch my branding. Back to here. Bring up my super chat. 251. All right, not bad. I think we could get to 357. We could do it. I know it's a slow night. I know Andrew's got a debate going on. There's a bunch of other things going on tonight. But yeah, we thought it was important to get to those legal topics. And I hope we did you all justice with those. So, of course, wonderfully, no whip songs tonight. Someone will have to donate $200 to hear any whip songs. How about that? Ultimately, this, there's going to be big court cases released tomorrow. It'll be interesting to talk about. But like I said, I think that Trump's going to lose the birthright citizenship case. So that is that's my opinion on the matter. Checking a couple messages real quick. Andrew was destroying his opponent. I'm not surprised whatsoever. So, I can't thank Lavin enough. $200. Unreal. How's it going, everyone over there on Rumble? Good to see you all. Now, I do believe, unless something changes, that I will be doing the extravaganza all week. So make sure you're checking that out. That's over on the Crucible's Rumble channel. And that's something that you could check out if you like. I would much appreciate it. There's a man named Austin Hall that thinks that getting $357 is unreasonable. I don't know how you know this, but it's true. Just 2 days ago. 2 days ago, he made that claim. Unbelievable. So we have options. You'll never support Rumble. Fair enough, Nico. I think it's important to support free speech platforms like that. Someday YouTube will probably shut me down. So it's nice to have sort of backup options like that. But that's just my opinion. Humphrey's executor is gone. It is historic. That's true. It's a big, big case. Listen, it's 11 o'clock. I think I'm going to call it an early night if no one minds. We'll say we lose tonight. Austin Hall wins. I don't know what to say. It's a bummer. But I really could use the sleep. I really could. That's right. Night shift should be ashamed. I really could use the sleep, though. I did do an hour over there on the extravaganza. We've gone 3 hours here tonight. So that's 4 hours of streaming. I think I'm doing okay. But, man, I had some jet lag last night. Was having trouble sleeping. This is my first time ever being on the West Coast time zone. What a shit show that is. The owner of Rumble claimed something rude about a friend of yours. Oh, well, I lost to Ryan and Austin Hall. Loser. I'm just a loser. Loser. Well, what can I say? I lose tonight. Let's see who's on streaming that we could raid over to. I know Ryan, or I don't know if Ryan's still streaming. I know Andrew is. Last night it had been a week since I streamed and I forgot how to raid someone. It was crazy. I was like, wait, what? What's going on here? Let's see what we got. Let's go with... Oh, there's a lot of people on. We'll go with Cool Vic. Why not? I would rate Andrew, but I don't think he needs me. In my opinion. I think he's doing very well for himself. So, all right. We'll be back tomorrow. Promise. I also have something different planned. I've been talking to some people. So, I'll wait to announce that, but it's something interesting that I think maybe you guys will like. And that'll be coming up in the near future. So, all right. Thank you to everyone today that supported me. Thank you to my editor, Black Elk. Thank you to all of my great moderators. I appreciate you all. Thanks to everyone who donated. 11. Thanks to my co-host, Ryan Mullally. Thank you to everyone who chatted, liked, subscribed, etc. You guys are the best. Remember, we'll be back tomorrow, 5:30, Rumble, Crucible's Rumble channel. And I'll be back tomorrow night at 10 p.m. for a regular show, baby! And I'll yell at everyone because we didn't make the goal tonight. Yeah, Wade, there's no more donos to be at. Lavin spent $200, so no whip wheels could play. So unless someone donates $200, and I'm sort of tired, yeah, blame Lavin. I like Lavin, so. I was just down there at Turning Point. Just take a moment to say a prayer for Charlie Kirk and his family. We talked a lot today about the left's radical agenda to pack courts. We talked about that. But don't forget just how much of a propensity for violence they could have. Don't forget. And so please say a prayer for Charlie, his wife, his kids, and the rest of his loved ones. And use that to motivate you to understand just what the stakes are. So thank you so much, everyone. We'll talk to you all tomorrow. Enjoy the raid of Cool Vic. As always, have a good one.
Only in America is it possible to say, you know what, I don't like the way the country is going, and to do something about it. Take that risk. Take that leap of faith. Stay involved. Trust God and act obediently. Romans 12:2 verse. That God will use all things for good for those who love him. It's bigger than you. I want you to remember that. It is bigger than you. It's bigger than me. You are here to make somebody else's life better, the pursuit of liberty and freedom. You know what gives me strength? The hundreds of thousands of you that say, Charlie, keep going.
1 Corinthians 5 and 15. So that's all pretty amazing evidence, not just intra-biblical evidence, but extra-biblical evidence that Jesus Christ was a real person. He lived a perfect life. He was crucified, died, and rose on the third day, and he is Lord and God of all.